Eventually, my computer can do its stuff. And good day, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 28. This evening we're going to have Sojo, Adaman, Ozzy, and Big Dave, who has been on once before, I believe. And I'm going to do what I usually do and start us off with a bit of a tune. Okay. Okay. All right, I'm sorry about that one, folks, but I'm having a few computer issues at the moment, so I'm afraid we're not going to have our normal musical tunes, so you'll get that one next week. So what I'm going to do, yeah, I'm sorry about that, guys. I'm having a few computer issues at the moment. This is a very old computer. My modern computer has broken and it's not been fixed yet. So I'm having a few issues, so we're not going to get our tunes this week, I'm afraid to say, but we'll get them next week.
Can't be helped, can it?
No. So what I'm going to do is do what I usually do, go around our guests. I'll go clockwise this time and ask them if they have a first issue to bring up. So, Big Dave, over to you.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that. What did you say?
I'm going to do what I usually do, and that is to ask the guests one by one.
That's right.
What's the first issue you want to bring up, if there's anything in particular?
Right, so one thing that I have noticed as of recently is obviously with the current scandal going with Hancock, one thing I've noticed is that the primary problem being highlighted with the whole shebang that's been occurring is that it's not that he has cheated on his wife or had an extramarital affair or anything of the immoral nature of his doings, but because the simple fact that he's broken lockdown legislation. That's the only problem that you've seen being brought up in the media. I think that just says a lot about our society as a whole, doesn't it?
Yeah, nothing moral is mentioned at all. Yes, I noticed that. I mean, of course, the chick he was having the affair with is also married. So, you know. I don't know. I'm no Hancock fan, but I'm even less of a fan of him now than I was before I heard that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Sojo, any first issues you want to bring up?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, I don't think I like this characterization of Hancock. I mean, because the more I dig into this issue, I mean, I get the impression that the man that he cucked, actually, I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he actually digs it. It's his kink. If we like to, yes,
that just makes everything even worse.
That makes it more embarrassing for him in many ways.
Oh well, I don't. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I posted a Twitter thread on this, but I actually think that as a couple, they've been doing this for quite some time, and really, it's quite funny, really, because I think the Overton window hasn't shifted far enough to the left yet, where a man can come out and say, "Oh no, I like being cucked." I think we're not there yet. But I think give it a few more years and this won't even be a news event. It will just, the press won't even be interested because it will just be sort of, de rigueur, it'd just be the done thing.
Well, outside of time, it's barely a news event now, isn't it? I mean, they're making more of a fuss about him breaking lockdown than about the fact there's actually an affair going on.
Between two married people, yeah.
I'm just wondering if he was wearing those feminist socks. That's all I want to know.
I'm a feminist, yeah. But what you tend to find is these male feminists actually tend to be the guys who actually beat up women and this kind of stuff, So I don't know. I agree.
Who's the feminist here?
I don't know.
Hancock used to wear feminist socks, didn't he?
Yeah, he used to say...
A self-proclaimed male feminist is Hancock.
Yeah, he used to say, this is what a feminist looks like or something on his socks.
Yeah. But I mean, this what Sojo is saying about the husband, if it's true, it just goes back to what Big Dave was saying. The whole thing is there's just no morals anymore at all, really.
Well, but if you consent to it, then if they've got this kind of weird ass relationship where he digs being cheated on and he gets off on it, then where do the morals come into this?
Well, I mean, then he's an excuse for a man, but I mean, what more can you say?
Oh yeah, I mean, the guy's a cuck. I mean, let's just sort of break down and deconstruct what this pufter wears. And this is allegedly a straight man with 3 children, and yet he wears pink trousers, and canvas shoes. He packed the car of his wife as she left. I mean, I just don't buy it. I think he gets off on it.
Can we be sure that those children are his, though?
Wow, that's a good question.
Yeah, I suppose there's that.
And also, I mean, this will come across as being rude, potentially, but does anybody else think that when they look at his picture, they think he's a bit of a downer? He's got a bit of Downsy there. He
looks weak.
Right.
That's all I see. He just looks weak.
Yeah, he's a chinless wonder. He's a chinless wonder for sure.
Like in terms of physiognomy, he just doesn't look right. He looks, I don't know, just like I say, bit of a downer, bit of a downy.
Yeah.
There's something off.
On the front of one of the newspapers, and it looked like one of these sort of Victorian-esque photos with the woman sitting in the chair and the man standing behind, even though it was actually reversed.
Yeah.
He was sitting in the chair with terrible posture, and she's sort of looming over him.
Well, this is the other thing. Exactly, Ataman. It's just the roles are reversed. It should be, the man is standing over his woman, sort of, looking over her, protecting her. That's the pose. It's like a man and his child, sort of looming over them. Well, not looming over them, but you know what I mean. Like, sort of casting a shadow over them, protecting them. And it's the other way around. It's like she's sort of like, he's sitting there like this gimp, and she's sort of towering over him, and it's just just wrong. But it's fascinating to watch it, fascinating to look at it. And then also, if you look at the photos of his shops, they're all like pink. It's just, I don't know, Duke. There's just gayness runs through this entire society.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We're in a bad place. That goes without saying. I mean, Adaman, any first things you would like to bring up this evening?
No, I think everyone's just been talking about the Hancock thing. No, actually nothing.
But I mean, I think, we really need to, I would like to go through these photos for the audience. I mean, I'm not sure that they've actually seen them yet, but I think we should go through them one by one.
I don't think that's a good plan with my computer this evening, frankly, Sojo, if you'll forgive me. Maybe next week, if you like.
Can you sort this out? It's just...
Yeah, no, it'll be sorted out by next week, but it just isn't sorted out yet,
Okay.
Yeah.
Ozzy, any first things you'd like to bring up?
Well, a lot's been said already. Regarding flat cock in hand, the only thing I'd really add is I've talked to a few birds about his grasp now of all the bits that men like. And they all said that it was very underwhelming, and he looked very soft. So even when he's cheating and being adulterous, he's quite a weak man. But what else? Apart from that, I guess this week has just been it's been a pretty boring week for news. One of the things that has been interesting is, of course, in the States, and I know we don't like talking about the States, but it'd be funny to see if Biden gets excommunicated, and that's just a nice little bit of that would just be a nice little bit of embarrassment.
We can hope. We can hope.
I've heard about this, but
Certainly
is this
can.
actually something that the church is going to go through with?
So the bishops in America are considering it. They've voted to go ahead with the excommunication, but the Pope could block it.
Right.
It's and of course Biden has said it won't happen. So now it's kind of pressure is on the Catholic Church to make it happen. But I don't know. I just find it a nice, funny bit of drama.
It's funny as well how many bad takes come out about this. Like you get all these people banging on about separation between church and state, and you have to kind of point out to them it doesn't actually say that anywhere in the Constitution.
Well,
and all this other various crap they come out with.
Yeah, well, Congress, Democrats in Congress want to, I think, strip the Catholic Church of charitable status, and of course because they're doing it for political reasons, it's a violation of the First Amendment. But it's not particularly dramatic or important. I just think it's funny.
Right, but it's not actually. I mean, this is another thing that I think people get wrong. It's not actually against the First Amendment. The First Amendment only bars the federal government from sponsoring any religious institution.
Yeah.
But religious institutions can do it the other way around.
Yeah, exactly.
And in fact, the first time the phrase separation of church and state came up was in a letter by, I forget who it was, but he was actually warning against the idea of going down a path of the separation between church and state.
Mm.
Hey,
we should have
don't like it. Build your own church.
Yeah, exactly. We should have had Limbu on tonight. He's our resident Catholic expert, I believe. But yeah.
Turn this place into a Roman temple. Oh.
Well, the thing I wanted to bring up was the huge, and it really was huge, demonstration in London today against the lockdowns, which is being underplayed by all the mainstream media, of course. But I actually watched some, what I presume is drone footage, but it could be taken from a tall building, and it was an enormous demonstration that stretched for blocks and blocks and blocks. It wasn't a few thousand people. It was an enormous demonstration, and they weren't all from London, obviously, because you could see Welsh and Scottish flags and what have you in the demonstration as well. So that was the main thing I wanted to bring up. There was an enormous demonstration in London earlier today against the lockdowns because of this extension of another 4 weeks before there's going to be any weakening in the UK, and I strongly suspect it will get extended again after that.
Do we know how large it was?
Well, it'd be difficult to say, but honestly, I watched a couple of videos on it, and as I say, one of them was either from a drone or from a very tall building, and the demonstration stretched for blocks and blocks and blocks, and it was packed.
I mean,
I would imagine that you're talking about over 100,000 people, I would guess.
I mean, my immediate thoughts on this jump to the Remain protests or the People's Vote protests in 2019, in which they had something like 20,000 people crammed around Marble Arch, and they kicked up an enormous fuss, and nothing happened. I expect that in a very similar manner, nothing much will come of this. But
did you know that they have thousands of protests a year in China?
Yeah, small ones that the government allows. Yes.
Well, no, they let everyone protest over everything. They just ignore them.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, and if it's something they don't like at all, like Tiananmen Square, then they roll in the tanks.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing though that people often don't realise is Tiananmen Square was a bit different, but it was the end of a series of protests that were actually against immigration.
Yeah. Mitch is saying in the chat here, I can highlight this, I suppose.
1 million turned up.
That's
Yeah.
probably a bit overblown.
That is a very, very.
I don't know if it was 1 million, but I tell you what, it was an awful lot of people. It really was. I certainly think it was 100,000 plus. And most of the mainstream media were just saying it was a few tens of thousand or something like that. You know, all these sort of aphorisms that they use to try and downplay the numbers. I think British people are starting to get fed up with this shit. I really do.
But the thing is, you can't translate that into anything. I mean, like the biggest protest in America, that happens every year, is the March for Life protest, and yet you'll be hard pressed to find someone who's even heard of it.
I had no idea that was a thing.
Oh yeah, it's a yearly thing. It's every year.
That was where the Covington Catholic kids were. That's what they were taking part in.
Yeah, but they just never cover it. The mainstream media ignore it in America.
And it's never achieved anything of any real note. So I mean, this is the thing: you can get loads of groundswell, loads of energy, but trying to translate that into any actual governmental change is.
Oh, I don't think a protest has ever done that.
No.
Like ever.
No.
You get a whole bunch of things about how the suffragettes changed the world and all that, but in reality, it's the pencil pushers who seem to really change things in democracy, at least in my understanding of it. Wasn't the women's right to vote put in on a bill about about retiring veterans coming back from the war who were no longer eligible to vote? They just stapled the women's right to vote on the back of that. It's clearly more of a pencil pusher phenomenon that changes in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, guys, I'm just replying to someone in the chat. You speak among yourselves.
Anyone got a controversial take? Yeah, go ahead, mate.
No. Somebody elucidate on what the fuck they were actually marching about.
They were protesting at the extended lockdown in the UK.
What does that even mean?
Well, the extra 4 weeks that they've added on at the moment, although, I say, I'll be amazed.
I just find it kind of odd that, you know, you would think that you would protest and march when you are really, really restricted in what you can do. What's the point of having a march when basically all the restrictions have been removed? It's kind of like, I mean, I get it, I suppose. It's kind of, you know, technically you can only have the protest once you've actually got your freedoms back, I suppose, in a way. But it just seems too late now.
I don't know. It's too little and too late, yes, but it's better than nothing.
I mean,
that's what I would say.
What's their central thesis? What are they driving at? What's the narrative of this group? I mean, who are they?
Well, I think there are a lot of different groups. I don't think they're one group. I think a lot of different groups are involved in this. But I mean, basically, they're people who are protesting against the government behaving in a totalitarian manner, which is what they have been doing since this whole supposed pandemic started, and not just in the UK, all over the world. I mean, it's happened here in Victoria in Australia. It's happened in parts of the US. It's happened all over Europe. It's, you know, it's a general thing. And all for a virus which has a at least 98.7% survival rate.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's over now, so it just seems like a dead story to me.
See, I don't think it is over. That's the thing. I think they're going to carry this on. I think what's going to happen is that even if they do reduce some of these restrictions in 3 weeks or whatever it is now, even then they're going to bring it back in the autumn. I almost guarantee it.
Well, I do wonder to what extent any of this stuff has actually worked. They keep talking about the numbers decreasing, but that's kind of just in line with what was happening at this time last year.
Yeah, totally agree.
And it's also what you would expect if most of the country now has been exposed to the virus and has now developed immunity.
Yep.
So Yeah, I kind of agree with Sojo here. It's just a bit of I suspect that they'll probably give back rights, and there'll be an ebb and flow, but the trend will be downwards, in terms of restrictions. And I mean, who knows? The government might use these powers again at some point in the future.
Almost certainly.
Particularly given that we've had a lot of civil unrest last year, and that's likely to only get worse into the future. But I think it will particularly pertain to COVID? I'm not so sure.
Well, hasn't Biden even been talking about using lockdowns against so-called climate change?
He could well have. I have no idea.
He's actually mentioned that in one of his rambling doolally speeches that he does.
I think, whatever it's worth, and I don't know why, but they seem to have already written that idea off, because I know there was a lot of the big publications were pointing out that the lockdown hasn't actually impacted pollution levels enough. Because, of course, largely it wasn't really a proper lockdown, and a lot of large bits of industry were still allowed to keep running.
Yep. Yeah, the big multinationals actually expanded and got richer. I mean, there's been an enormous transfer of wealth from small and medium-sized businesses to big, huge multinational corporations, which, in my humble opinion, was probably one of the reasons behind it in the first place. But I mean, that's just me. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I am a cynic when it comes to governments.
Okay, so now that you've ruled out that they won't be doing a lockdown for climate change, and
I haven't ruled that out.
Well, you just did.
No, I just said Biden has spoken about that in speeches. Adamant suggested that they might not do it. I didn't say that. Adamant did.
I don't think. I certainly don't think the general public or general business are going to put up with a lockdown for fucking climate change. That just won't happen.
I don't know. If they put up with it once, Sojo, for this, I think they'll put up with it for almost anything. I think the trouble. You can't take this stuff back once you've given up that freedom stuff.
I think there's a context behind disease, because people think, disease, that's going to kill me. I should probably listen to what Daddy says, as opposed to this thing called climate change, which is rather nebulous and hard to think about, whether we think it's real or not. And you'll probably say, so because I can't go outside because the temperature will be 0.1 degrees warmer in 10 years' time. No, I think I will go out. I think one's different from the other.
I wish I'd believed that, mate. I really do. I really wish I believed that people would actually turn around and say, no, we're not putting up with this shit. But everything I have seen over the last 18 months makes me think they won't. I mean, there were huge demonstrations in Germany against lockdowns at one stage. But the government, as Sojo pointed out with this demo in London today, the government in Germany ignored them. They used fairly brutal police tactics, as the police have in London, and also the police in Victoria and Australia, also pretty brutal against anti-lockdown demos. And I just think, once the government has got this sort of power over people, they're not going to give it up too easily. And
what power?
The power of saying you have to stay in your home.
Well, Parliament. This is bullshit. I'm sorry, Duke. This is bullshit. Parliament has the sovereign power to have done that, throughout history, and
never did. Never did.
It had to pass a bill
what would you call World War II?
Not even in World War II did they lock people in their homes. Never. Even in World War II. Because
they didn't have to.
Well, why did they have to now?
Because, whether right or wrong, they thought... This is where I will give them some leeway, because nobody really knew to begin with. But as the data becomes more obvious, it's like, there's no point having a lockdown. But
this is 18 months later. Don't forget, Sojo. They're still doing it.
Yeah, but no. But I would counter that by saying, what kind of lockdown is there now? I mean, there isn't really one, and all of the restrictions that were in place have been repealed.
So you can go into a pub, can you, and sit down and not wear a mask and all? Can you do that?
I think that's the case, is it not?
You have to sit in the beer garden. But
Thank you, Alan. Thank you.
So it's a little bit shit, but
Okay, it's a little bit shit, agreed. But, you know, it's not. You always like to make out that, oh, the government takes power, the government extends its reach, and then it never gives anything back. Well, that's just nonsense. That's not true.
So you don't think the government will use this power that they now know they can use anytime they feel like it in the future?
No, I don't. I don't think that they will just. I will be able to.
What will stop them?
Well, Parliament, for one thing.
They haven't stopped anything. There was hardly even a debate. The opposition were more keen on lockdowns than the government was.
But under what pretext is it going to be another lockdown? If it's not for COVID, then what? Climate change? Do you think the Tory backbenchers are going to go along with that?
Yes. Given all the other green policies, given all the other green policies that Alexander Johnson comes out with, some of which are ruinous in terms of Britain's wealth and also the cost of energy for consumers in the UK. The Tory backbenchers are going along with those quite fine.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone actually thinks that anyone's going to go ahead with that.
Well, I don't know, man. All the conservative stuff says they're going to.
Well, I mean, they've literally put in a thing that they're going to ban the sale of all petroleum cars by 2030,
Yep.
and
Yes,
none of
they
those
have.
companies' stocks have gone downhill.
Yep.
They're all still doing fine commercially.
Yep.
So
Because it's 9 years. Because it's 9 years in the future.
It's not because it's 9 years in the future. It doesn't take much to cause a scare in the market.
No, it doesn't. But 9 years is a long time.
It isn't in terms of investment, though.
No, it isn't in terms of investment. But the thing is, none of the companies even are causing a big fuss about it, are they?
Exactly, because they don't think it's going to happen.
Are you sure it's that, and it's not that they actually want it to happen?
Well, why would they want it to happen?
Well, look, I think we're going to see a step change. This is my whole point. I think part of the reason for bringing in only electric cars is, first of all, it's going to make cars much more expensive.
But they'll sell a lot less.
Yeah, they will. They'll sell a lot less of them. But most average people probably won't even be able to get one at all.
So how does that benefit the car companies?
I don't know, man. I don't know, but I definitely think it's part of this globo homo great reset thing that they want to do. I think they want to stop most ordinary people having their own transport. I really do.
It's to take away the general independence of the common person, really.
Yep.
All this business.
It's all this pushing us into being 21st century serfs. That's my own opinion. You may not agree, but I absolutely think that's what this whole thing's about.
Like, I get the idea of the government wanting to push towards this idea, but on this one policy, there doesn't seem to be anyone believing in the follow through.
Because no one believes it's going to happen. Exactly. But then, if you'd have turned, but Adam, if you'd have turned around and told British people in 2019, say, that it's in the middle of 2019, if you'd have said to British people that the British government is going to be able to effectively lock you in your home for most of the time, stop you working, close down your business, or 99% of people would have said, nah, never happened.
But if there was a stock market value on it and the government turned around and said, yeah, we're probably going to lock people in our house next year for a year, there would admittedly be a few people that would probably stay in and not believe it, but there'll be a huge amount of people that would probably go, oh shit, hang on, there's something to worry about here.
What do you consider? Have you ever considered why stock market values have not been affected by the lockdowns?
It has, though.
Not vastly.
Well, that's because it depends on the company. If you take it as an index, then no, but that's because companies like Amazon have won out hugely and other companies haven't.
Correct.
Yeah. Don't disagree with that. And of course, most of the businesses who are getting really destroyed are small businesses which are not on the stock market.
Exactly.
They're not public companies.
There was also a lot of liquidity gushed into the market, and there is a reason to, immediately into lockdown. I think the Bank of England printed something like £800 billion, and I think it's quite possible that a lot of that liquidity went into buying assets, particularly for a lot of people who are stuck indoors without a job. I wouldn't put it past them and are getting income. I wouldn't put it past them to go ahead and start buying assets. But that's anyone's.
Well, if they can afford it, of course.
If they can afford it, but you've got to remember that everyone was getting 80% of their pay, and they no longer had transportation fees.
Yeah, but hang on, quite a lot of those people, like their pay was not sufficient to really invest in assets anyway.
Not a lot of people, but those aren't the people who buy stocks anyway.
Yes, exactly.
So,
I just think this whole thing is much more nefarious than people think it is. I really do. Like I said, I'm going to repeat this again, even though I've said it many fucking times. This is a virus which has at least a 98.7 survival rate. It is not very dangerous to the vast majority of people. If you're under 80 and you're not hugely obese, or you don't have some really bad underlying condition, which is probably going to kill you sooner rather than later anyway, it's not a dangerous disease. Virus, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, but you have to... I think we all agree with that, but you have to contextualise the situation by the fact that we're governed by a gay mafia. Yeah. I mean, that is...
Well, yeah, but I'm not going to argue with that.
You put COVID together with the gay mafia, and, these people are sort of inherently concerned about their health because they've had their dicks cut off, they got HIV, STDs, all sorts. I mean, these are very, very unhealthy people. Yeah. Otherwise, they wouldn't have these views anyway.
Yep. Don't disagree with any of that.
So it's an explosive combination.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a cope to go with this idea that incompetence over malice, but a lot of this can just be tied up to incompetence.
I don't know. I think it's more malice than incompetence, although obviously there is some incompetence. There always is incompetence.
Okay, I'll put a little bit of nuance on it. It's malice preying on incompetence. You've got lobbying groups and special interest groups and all of that, bringing your malice in. And then you've got a central government that's just nothing but incompetence.
Yeah, and then on top of that, as Sojo just said, it's circumstances like the Western civilization is in such a fucking shit state these days. Yeah. There's no such thing as society anymore.
I actually think in the end analysis, we actually come to the same conclusion. We just differ on what the root causes are. So in many ways, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you think it's malice, and I just think that we're living. We're like this turd that's circling the drain, and we're about to be flushed.
Absolutely agree.
I left out
agree. Yep, I absolutely agree with you on that one, Sergio. I mean, I mostly agree with the stuff you say, but like you say, we come at it from slightly different angles. But yeah, Western society, I mean, going back to the original thing, we started talking about this whole wank Hancock and all this stuff.
Black cock in hand.
Yeah, there's no sort of moral anything in society anymore. There's just nothing.
Yeah. Well, I
remember when I was a teenager, if a British minister had been discovered in an affair, right, nothing to do with lockdowns or China virus or anything to do with that, just discovered in an affair, he would have had to resign, even when I was a teenager.
Well, Hancock has resigned, but
has he now resigned? Oh, good.
He has resigned.
He resigned quite recently.
I mean, it was something like 55 years ago that the Profumo scandal brought down the longest governing Conservative government for a long time.
Yes, I know of that.
Yeah, but in fact, something quite interesting that I've noticed. the more I think about it, the more it makes sense to me, is that Labour win because of Tory incompetence. Labour lose because no one likes Labour, and and part of Tory incompetence is basically becoming very stuck up your own arse and talking about very inward things, like with John Major in the EU and things like that. So anyway, that's a that was.
I would only hesitate to call them Tories because, like, I don't think they're conservatives at all.
Of course,
like Alexander Johnson doesn't have a conservative bone in his body, in my opinion.
I mean, he's done one or two good things in terms of conservatism. Like he blocked he blocked what's it called? He blocked prepubescent transitions. No, but like under 18 transitions. That's it.
Under 16, I think it is, not under 18. It should be under 18, but he did it under 16.
But you know, I mean, that's one thing, I guess.
Didn't he also basically legalize DIY abortion?
I mean,
no fault divorce.
Yeah. I mean, we should give Tories props where does anyone remember back in, you know, the haywires of 2016? I mean, back then I was a libertarian, so I hated it. But the Tories were going to pass anti-porn laws, and like I was so excited about that. And
basically, one of the only good things that Theresa May ever did, in my opinion. She ever tried to do.
Hang on, guys. Is Rory Herbert in the chat correct that Hancock's been replaced by Sajid David?
Yes,
he is.
The same man who resigned over some. He didn't like Boris for some reason or another. He resigned.
So now we have Priti Patel, Sajid Javid, and
Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, it's an increasingly British-looking cabinet, isn't it?
Incredibly British
Ashkenazi. Rob being an Ashkenazi, well, nearly 100% of the cabinet's in minority.
Rob is based. I like Rob.
I don't care about Dominic Rob one way or the other, to be honest with you. But all of these
Rob is an Anglican.
All these Indian guys.
He's an Anglican, but he's born to a Jew.
What does that even mean?
Yes, ethnic Jew, I suppose you could say. Yeah.
Don't really care.
Ashkenazi, I do believe the correct term is.
I don't care, Big Dave, honestly, about that. I'm much more concerned with all these Indian people who are in the British cabinet, because I don't think you'll ever find 3 British guys in the Indian cabinet. I really don't.
So Xi
Jinping, they are all 100% British, I'll have you know. What is anything less British than the name Rishi Sunak? That just makes me think of fish and chips.
Duke, I'm gonna have to pull you up here on your own logic. So, Priti Patel, her family were in I think Uganda. Uganda, servants of the empire. Much like the Gurkhas. Why is it that you will give dispensation to the Gurkhas and not the administrative bureaucrats running the empire?
Because Nepal was never part of the British Empire, and the Gurkhas fight for the crown because they fight for the crown. They were never run by the British.
But that makes even less sense, in the sense they weren't even part of the empire, and yet you want to basically consider them our brothers.
Because they're allies.
So people who administrate the empire were not allies.
I mean, I would put it like this: if someone,
Priti Patel's Asian ancestors in Uganda, where they were no doubt shopkeepers like most Asians in Africa. I don't think that Priti Patel's ancestors were administering the empire somehow.
I would put it this way: if you are a Gurkha, you have basically made an oath that you will die for this country if you need to.
You put your life on the line for Her Majesty the Queen.
An administrator, if you are ever in danger, then there are police who come to your door and make sure you're okay, and it's everyone's utmost importance that you don't die. I personally would put 2 different weights on the 2 different forms of service.
Yeah, absolutely right. And look, my empire loyalty and I sometimes describe myself as the last of the Empire loyalists, but my Empire loyalty is to the Old Commonwealth. And as I have said many times, but apparently I need to say again, the Old Commonwealth was Great Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back in the day, South Africa.
The Dominions.
Yeah. It wasn't. The African Empire, even the Asian Empire. Like, yeah, there were some good things about it. There were some bad things about it. But I'm not loyal to those guys. Why would I be? They were people we conquered.
Wait, so what about? But you don't like the Sikhs?
I don't have any opinion on the Sikhs. I'm pretty neutral on them for the most part. The British fought two very, very hard wars against the Sikhs because they were damn good soldiers. And after that, the British recruited them into the Indian Army because they were good soldiers. But that doesn't make them British.
Duke, what would you say if the Home Secretary was a Gurkha?
What would I say? What, you mean a former serving Gurkha soldier?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So it's okay to have
I'd say fine.
So we want
if he was a former serving Gurkha soldier who'd served in the British Army, yeah, I'd be fine with that.
So
yes.
we wouldn't want to follow the Malaysian strategy then, where Malays are almost the majority of Malaysia, but they're the only people allowed to take up governance. So they can all.
I don't think that would be a totally British way of doing things. My objection to the current Conservative cabinet is there are too many Indians in it, or Indian subcontinent people in it. That's my objection. And one, I wouldn't really much care. Three is vast overrepresentation.
Very senior positions.
Yeah,
to be
it's a vast overrepresentation. If there was one, I wouldn't much care, to be honest. But three, that's vastly too many. It's too many.
Yeah, I would just put forward that as a general rule, anyone who wants to become a politician in this country should probably have a demarcation of service, whether that's like by charitable means or military service or something like that. Like you need to
if only. I mean,
ideally,
I would like that.
Ideally, you'd have like a proven loyalty to the people of the country. And like when I say charity service, I don't mean like going lifting coconut trees in Hawaii. I mean actually, working in soup kitchens and things like that. And someone brought up Sikhs earlier. A lot of Sikhs around about London, which I'm staying at the moment, they do a lot of soup kitchen work and that sort of thing. So, like, I really don't see a problem.
Mostly for other Sikhs.
That's not true, mate. That's really not true.
No, that was a question.
That's not true.
That's just not true.
Wait, I said it was a question.
No, there
didn't sound like it.
Well, that was what it was. It was a question.
Sikhs are very good.
Sikhs
are just good dudes, and like if one of them had a proven track record of charitable service, I mean, one of my ancestors, she won the George Cross for charitable service, and like if one of them won the George Cross for like just being really epic in terms of how they distributed stuff, then yeah, sure, I could see them standing as member of parliament. That doesn't mean I expect them to be like at the front of cabinet or whatever, but I think we should probably distance ourselves from this sort of purist perspective that we may see in places like Malaysia. I don't think that's very British.
Well, I just said I
This conversation
I
stinks of liberal humanism.
Yeah.
I disagree entirely.
The benchmark for whether somebody should be in government is how many fucking bowls of soup they served up to the masses. No,
I would prefer it to be. I would prefer it to be military service, but given these days you also have to have women in government, sadly, in my opinion, but you do, then I suppose you've got to allow other things as well. But I would prefer it was like in the old days, like in the days of, say, Enoch Powell, for example, like most British cabinet ministers had served in the military in World War II. Most of them.
Personally, my view on the matter is this.
Some of them in World War One as well.
We are the British nation. So therefore, the British nation should be governed entirely and only by the natives of the British nations, the Welsh, the Cornish, the Scottish, the Irish, and the English and like, because we are the British nation and those are the natives to this nation. To have any other type governing this nation would simply be against the natural order of things.
I mean, I'd cut out the Welsh and the Cornish, but yeah.
No, I wouldn't cut out any of that.
I can see that perspective. Like I'm not suggesting that you like have people like that in government, and I'm not suggesting that it's only like soup kitchens, but like I think there's like a certain point at which I don't think it's liberalism to have someone basically say, I've demonstrated considerable sacrifice to this nation, considerable care. I have gone out of my way to do my best for it, whether that's through earning medals or CBEs or whatever. I think there's a difference between that and this sort of liberalism of anyone of anywhere should be able to stand for parliament. I mean, that to me is anathema.
But I think. Sorry, if I may, Ataman, then I'll shut my mouth. But the thing is that I look at the idea of like conceptually a Gurkha serving in the cabinet. It's like, hang on a minute, this guy doesn't know anything of the soul of the English, the British, the Scottish. The guy wouldn't have even lived in England or anywhere in the British Isles. He would have been born and raised in Nepal.
Hang on. How would he not have lived in Britain? The Gurkha regiments are all based in Britain on a rotational basis.
His formal years would have been spent in Nepal. He would have been steeped in the traditions of Nepal. And the idea that this person is fit to govern our people, to have a say on the way that our nation is governed, when basically he's just an alien outsider.
Okay.
Exactly.
So
that doesn't make any sense.
Hang on. If you're saying that, Sojo, then I will just say Rishi Sunak, Javid and Priti Patel.
Yeah, but they're of the soil, but they're not of the blood.
That's correct. That was basically would have been my retort, is that actually they have been sort of culturalized and born in this country, but
no, Priti Patel wasn't born. Priti Patel wasn't born in this country.
But when is that the case? But if that's the case, when did she come to the country?
Oh, she would have been a kid, I'm sure, but it was like when Idi Amin chucked all the Uganda Asians out because they were ripping off all the Africans, which is basically what those guys do in every African country they're in. And I lived there, so I saw it.
Drew, I'm sorry, you're completely wrong. She was born in London.
Oh, okay, so she was born just after her parents arrived here, was she?
Yeah. So what about Sunak? What about him?
Yeah, you're going to find he was probably born here too. So you'd sooner have Priti Patel, Sunak, and Sajid Javid than you would have a bloke who'd actually put his life on the line for the country.
Well, I don't.
I.e. a Gurkha soldier who'd served maybe 21 years in the British Army.
Well, for me, it's not a question of either or. It's like, well, none. But if I can't make an argument for Rishi Sunak or Savage.
I'm not making an argument for any of them, because I mean, I'll be honest. If my system was in place, none of them would be in the British cabinet. But that's just
no. But what I'm doing is I'm questioning your system where you've served the state and therefore you then have a right to govern the native population of a country that you really have nothing to do with. You've just simply been an arm of the state to fight its gay wars. I don't see how that gives the Gurkhas.
I don't know that Britain's fought only gay wars in like recent times. I mean, the only
gay it's wars, a hypothetical, right?
Yeah, the only gay wars we've been involved in recently have been American wars. So like I don't think when the Gurkhas, along with the Royal Marines and the British Army, were defending Borneo from the Indonesians, that was a gay war.
Well, I mean, what do I give a shit about Borneo? I mean,
yeah, well, you probably don't know much about it, with all due respect. But
probably, but I mean, why, as an Englishman, why should I give a shit about Britain ruling over Borneo?
Because it was like it still is actually one of the areas of the world which has British allies in and British bases and all this kind of stuff, which is kind of useful, you know. And Borneo is jungle mostly. Yes,
Wait,
it is.
hang on.
So
I don't get the connection. Are we letting in millions of Borneos?
No, we're not. No, we're not. There aren't millions of people in Borneo. It's like it doesn't have a huge population because it's mostly jungle. You know, it's full of Dayaks and headhunters and people like that. It's quite an interesting place, actually.
Should we be allies with Pakistan as we deport them all back?
No, I don't think we should be allies with Pakistan, but that's got more to do with like stuff about the Taliban and all sorts of other things.
We can still send them all back, though. So that could still be achieved.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said there, Dave. What did you say?
So they could still very likely be achieved. You know, they in the circumstances that they're in, I'm sure they wouldn't sort of decline a good few men for their ever-expanding military complex. Say if we could just say, Pakistan, but we'll give you all the men, the Pakistani men in our country, we'll give you all of them in return for them to serve in your military. I'm sure they wouldn't exactly refuse a deal such as that, if it could be made.
Well, it's quite expensive to pay for all those men. What I would instead put forward is you basically have this deal of not necessarily, basically doing this too explicitly, but you basically say, hey, to people who are in the country and on welfare, hey, look, you came into this country and under the assumption that you wouldn't be a burden to us. How about then you go back to where your original place of origin, and we'll pay for you. We'll pay for your welfare there if you still need it. I think it's probably a bit more diplomatic than just saying, "Yeah, guys, off to war," and slapping them on the bum.
But theoretically, if we were to do it, who would stop us? You know, they don't want to stop us. They're not armed. We just,
What, Pakistan?
No, the Pakistanis in our nation.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not going to get into that here because, listen, guys, let us remember we're on YouTube.
Yes.
And, there's some things you can say and some things you can't say. I am firmly convinced that the way forward for British nationalism and for stopping the demographic decline in the UK, the first and most important thing we have to do is to stop mass immigration of all places everywhere. Don't care if
why people are still cucked though.
No, it's very difficult, Alan, and I totally agree with you, mate. We can't even get people to like all turn around and say, no, I'm not going to wear a fucking mask.
But you need to. I mean, the more prescient thing is you need to infuse people with a bit of I don't know, a bit of grit, a bit of spirit first. Well, I mean, once you've done that, it'd be the easiest thing in the world.
Yes.
But
yeah, I agree.
And even if you could do it without sort of divvying up the people again, you're kind of stuck back at step one, which is okay. We've got a largely homogenous nation now, but it's full of gays and other such degenerates.
Yep.
Well, I would put forward that there is evidence to suggest that diversity does make people completely crazy. And basically it destroys your discuss sensitivity barriers, which is one of the very important parts of your psychology that makes you conservative. And you basically, as you start become, and I'm not saying that migrants are like that in any way, it's just a natural human response that if you see someone different, you go, they're not like me, I want to stay away from that. And as you repeatedly break down those barriers, people just generally start caring less. And that's a possible reason why we're really, okay with drag queen story hour and things like that.
Okay, can I just interrupt you guys for a sec, because Sojo has just said that he's got a critique of the Gurkhas that he would like to put forward. So go for it, Sojo.
Thank you, Duke. Yes, I wanted to question really the moral fibre of the Gurkhas, because actually I find it quite funny that, firstly, that they would actually be willing to serve a foreign power, and then that they would, you know, I'm not saying all of them, in fact, very few of them actually come to the UK. But again, like, why would you leave Nepal and come to the UK, having served a foreign power that's not, you know, doesn't serve your people, doesn't serve your government, doesn't serve your king? You serve someone else. So what would be the rationale, the reasons for doing that?
Well, first
It
of
just
all,
strikes me as being odd.
First of all, 200 years of tradition for a start. But
Well, I think the
Well,
thing
but again,
where
I would
look
critique
is,
that tradition. Why?
but aren't the Gurkhas essentially an ethnic group that is a minority under a Maoist controlled state?
yes, absolutely right. The vast majority of Nepal is not Gurkha. The Gurkhas
right,
are a
really?
minority. Yeah, no, most Nepalis are not Gurkhas.
So they're like a, dare I say it, they're like Jews finding an ally in someone else.
Not really anything like them at all. No, they're not big.
No, it's the behaviour in the sense that you're a minority in another country and you find an ally elsewhere.
Yeah,
For
but
financial reasons.
But
In
no,
fact,
but the Gurkhas.
it's very similar actually.
They're a bit different in that they don't like, because usually diasporas get into certain career paths, don't they? They go into things that the natives won't do, like sex trade and stuff like that.
Yeah. Whereas
The
the
Gurkhas
Gurkhas
become
Gurkhas-
warriors.
Yeah, they're soldiers.
Yeah.
That's what. Well, they didn't become warriors. It's like traditional for the Gurkhas to be warriors. That's what they were in Nepal. And in fact, the reason the Gurkhas started to join the British forces was because the British and the Gurkhas fought two very, very hard wars that the British just about managed to win in both cases. And after that, the two sides admired one another. Because they were pretty honourable, like the Gurkhas didn't murder prisoners and this kind of stuff, which the British in the 19th century didn't either. And no, they didn't. So the two sides came to admire one another, and that's why the Gurkhas serve in the British Army and have done for over 200 years.
Okay. No, I think that's a great answer. I accept that entirely. That's really good. Is it also true that when they draw their knives or their sword, that they must then draw blood? Is that
That's a bullshit story. But yeah,
it's a bullshit story. Okay.
Yeah, it's a bullshit.
Okay,
story.
so really, if we were to put them in a context of being mercenaries, which is kind of what they are,
but only for the British.
Only for the British, but then it's like Britain has had mercenaries over the years. The Irish, German mercenaries.
Irish weren't mercenaries, not when they fought for the British.
I just think that I have to push back on this concept of service guarantee citizenship. I think no.
I totally
privileges.
I totally disagree with that. I'd love if we had a system where service guarantee citizenship and voting and all that kind of stuff. I think that would be a damn good system.
Well, I think I would agree with the concept that service guarantees voting.
Yeah,
but I don't. I don't really. First of all, why does the British Army require foreigners to fill its ranks?
Well, it doesn't require foreigners. It uses them because.
Well, then why have them then?
Because they're some of the best. Because they're some of the best soldiers in the world. And we are lucky to have, and we are lucky to have them.
Oh God, you're so.
I'm so absolutely filled with the whole mythos and everything of the British Army. Yes, I am. Sorry, I am. But I'm also filled with the history of the British Army and the number of times that the Gurkhas have stood with the British soldiers, and without them, we would have lost.
Okay, and I'm sure that they would still serve even if they just picked up their pension and their pay, but they could never come to the UK. I think they would probably still.
Well, you're talking about sell in the UK rather than come to the UK, because they all come to the UK when they're in the army.
Yeah, sorry. That's implied. I mean, obviously, I don't have a problem with them coming here to train and whatnot, but they simply can't settle. They can't have citizenship.
No, you see, my opinion on this is that a Gurkha soldier who has completed 9 years service without any problems, like he's not had any disciplinary offences or anything like that, if he's completed his 9-year service and he wants to settle in Britain, I've got nothing against that. Myself, that's my own opinion. I don't mean you guys must adopt it. But also, wait a minute, guys. You've also got to bear in mind there's only, I think, 3 battalions of Gurkha infantry these days, plus a few signallers and engineers. So you're talking about maybe, I don't know, 50 blokes a year. It's such a tiny number that compared to the immigration that UK gets.
But intellectually, you leave the door open to it just being universally applied.
No, you don't, because no one else serves in the British Army. No, nobody.
Oh,
no.
You can get a bunch of blacks and people from Trinidad and Tobago who serve in the army, and then
we get very tiny numbers in the British Army of people from other places like Fiji, etc. Tiny numbers.
But it's the principle.
No,
not just the practice.
Do you know what? When you look at there are more people come across the English Channel every fucking week in dinghies than we would get from Gurkhas who'd served 9 years in the British Army. Every week.
I don't agree with that either, but that's not an argument to give the Gurkhas citizenship.
All right, I think you're doing what you do quite a lot, Sojo. You're causing a row because you know it will cause a row. Because I like the Gurkhas.
This is your go-to line when you. Oh, I don't agree with what Sojo's saying. You must be saying it just to be an arsehole.
No, I just think like you're a bit of a contrarian if you would agree with that.
No, this is my opinion. Just because they've served in the fucking army doesn't mean that they should have citizenship. Sorry.
All right, hang on.
Can I ask Sojo a question?
Go on.
Would you make any differentiation if it was them swearing allegiance to the crown versus them swearing allegiance to just the country, like any other immigrant tries to?
No, I don't think that they should have. I don't think because they're not of the same stock of us. Therefore, they should not have the same rights as us. You can't put an Englishman and a Welshman and a Scotsman on the same level as a Gurkha. I don't care what allegiance they swear to who.
But you would let them stay here under a diminished rights. Would that be the same as for everyone else, or would that also be like a service guarantee citizenship?
Well, here's the thing: is that in many ways, migration and whatnot wouldn't really bother me if all of these people were just like deeply disenfranchised, had no rights, were just second-class citizens. I mean, who would care? We would still have governance over our own country. Their votes wouldn't count. It would effectively just be the indigenous vote would decide policy, would decide the politics of the country. The opinions of black people, Black Lives Matters, it wouldn't be an issue because they wouldn't be franchised.
Yeah.
Like South Africa under apartheid, essentially, then.
Apartheid, yeah. And it's just, then if you want to view them as being sort of like, slave labourers for, mass global society, then...
the thing is all about, though, that works for a limited amount of time, but eventually that system is going to collapse, and it's going to collapse hard, and it's going to collapse horribly. And bad things
I don't disagree with that, though. I don't disagree with that. I mean, look, what I think you've got to do is you've got to say, look, if you're a new immigrant to the country, you don't get any social security benefits or get to use the National Health Service for free or any of that stuff for 10 years.
I don't think that's enough, though, because
but I reckon if you did that, Alan, I reckon the vast majority of these people wouldn't even come in.
Well, I'm not sure if that's true, though, because they don't just come here because half of them don't even know what the welfare is like when they get here anyway. But they think they can do better for themselves anyway. Look, there's a bit in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations where he covers he talks very briefly about like lotteries, and he says that that people over egg their chances in the lottery. So people are less likely to go and buy like a raffle ticket for their small community raffle because they don't really see the point. But £1 million lottery draw, they'll rush out and buy a ticket for, even though their odds of winning are massively diminished. And you kind of see that with how people view their chances on migration. Everyone thinks that they're going to be the one to get here and get a cool job. and of course most of them don't. But they don't realise that when they're coming here. And I don't think just saying, well, you're not going to get NHS cover or welfare is really going to change anything, because they don't think they're going to have to rely on that stuff anyway.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that, to be honest. I mean, look, I certainly think it would help if we did that. Put it that way. And like the idea that, like, oh, okay, well, we'll take anyone, which is basically where we are at the moment, and they can all bring their families in and do anything you like. That's our big problem. It ain't if we take, I don't know, 50 Gurkha veterans a year who have actually put their life on the line for the country. I just think this is a stupid argument that we're having in some respects.
Yeah, but that's liberal, Duke. You're being a liberal right now.
Yeah, I'm always accused of being a liberal, and the funny thing is, I'm not in the least liberal. But there we go. I'm not even slightly liberal. I am.
I Discord the other day, but not now.
I'm a British Army loyalist as well as anything else, and like, you know, the British Army without the Gurkhas wouldn't be the British Army, frankly. You know, the Argentines in the 1982 Falklands War were fucking terrified when we sent a Gurkha battalion down there. Just hearing that they were going to arrive. They've got more Victoria Crosses, which is the hardest military medal to earn in the world. Like, you can forget your Congressional Medal of Honor and all this bullshit. The VC is a much more difficult medal to earn. Just look how many are given. And also, like, the number of VCs that are posthumous, you know, they're given to guys who died doing what they were doing. And the Gurkhas have won an enormous number of VCs compared to how small a number of soldiers there are. So I'm just not going to have this shit about the Gurkhas. Like, if 50 Gurkhas a year are able to settle in the UK if they want to, and the vast majority of them won't, like maybe 10% would, maybe, of that 50. So you're talking about maybe 5 blokes a year into UK with the amount of fucking immigration that we get now. It's just a joke, guys. Honestly, it's almost it's making a point for no purpose, if you'll forgive me for saying so.
They hear the lamentations of their homeland. That's what happens.
Well, actually, I said that earlier on the Discord. You know, like, that's one of the things I like about the British Empire is that we heard so many lamentations from our enemies' women. It was great. You know, I've got nothing against that shit. So, yeah, I don't know. Look, I'm not a liberal at all. If anyone thinks I'm a liberal, or if anyone thinks this is a Civnat stream, they are making a really bad mistake. What this stream is not, is it's not an anti-JQ stream, and it's not a Nazi LARPer stream. That's what it's not.
It's funny you said it's not a Nazi LARPing stream. When you were saying, oh, they're the best soldiers in the world, I was very, very nearly going to step in and go, well, they're no 2nd SS Panzer Division, are they?
The Gurkhas would ruin the 2nd SS Panzer Division. What are you talking about?
Not likely.
Mate, you need to go. All right, Armin, go and read some history. You can find some of it on the internet of the Gurkhas in Italy fighting against the Germans. They did extremely well.
I read some pop history, and it was Max Hastings. And he reckoned that the 2nd SS Panzer Division was their generation's version of the Spartans. Hard on the Eastern Front, one of the best fighting divisions around.
As a general rule, I don't know anything about Das Reich, but I do know in general for most of the SS, they were actually nowhere near as elite as people said they were. They varied.
They were a lot of them were army.
Most of them were just like, you know, good-looking 16-year-olds without fillings that they slapped on an army uniform and said, "Well, you're blonde, so you'll win." This is
the thing, because he points out that like most of the SS were they were like army rejects. that the SS picked up because they thought they could make them fiercely loyal. But he does kind of point out
later in the war, yeah.
He kind of points out that particular division though did end up going on to be pretty incredible. They spent a lot of time on the Eastern Front. They were very, very battle hardened.
I don't know. I mean, look, I hesitate to slag off Max Hastings because when he was the editor of the Telegraph, he once gave me a two-page spread in the middle of it. So when I was running military history tours, so I hesitate to slag him off, but there's quite a lot of history I don't agree with Max Hastings on, not least his opinion on Britain joining the First World War.
Yeah, he's a big cocked on Brexit as well, isn't he? Like he did a column
haven't followed him.
No idea, but he did describe Kaiser Wilhelm as like almost a well-known Austrian artist.
Yeah, he has. Yes.
Yeah, which
absolutely.
Is just hilarious.
I bet his Cromwell takes a fucking shit as well. Then, I mean, it sounds like the guy's wrong on just about everything.
Yeah, he got some things right. He gets some things right, military history wise. He wrote a good book about bomber command in World War II, which I largely agreed with. But his takes on the First World War and Britain's involvement are fairly infantile, in my opinion.
He's definitely much stronger on the Second World War, but maybe that's just because, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I read Hell Let Loose. That was definitely a very good read compared to all the other stuff he's written. That's one of those superior works that he's done out of all of them.
Catastrophe is pretty good, but
he's a very good writer. Don't get me wrong. He's a very good writer. That's why he was the editor of the Telegraph, after all. But I certainly don't always agree with his historical takes, and I think about Britain's involvement in World War One. He's totally wrong.
Yeah, he's just not the most. One of the things I don't really like about when you get these historians is when they go very political about it all, and Hastings is definitely one of those. I think Beaver is a pretty good contrast to him because not apparently. I mean, I've read a fair few of Beaver's works now, and I would say he's actually pretty good at this stuff. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Hastings' book on the Falklands War ain't bad, but you have to remember that Max Hastings was mates with the SAS, and so he big ups some things and doesn't big up some other things, and overlooks a lot of what the Royal Navy was doing as well, to be fair. If I was going to recommend a book on the Falklands War, it would be The Royal Navy in the Falklands War by Brown. It's a really good book, and I suggest everyone should read that. It's an excellent book.
Mm.
So yeah, King Baby Bob, the thing I've just put up on the screen, yeah, I mean that was pretty typical of the Gurkhas in World War II.
Yeah.
Everywhere they fought, they were just outstanding, and everywhere they fought since then, they have also been outstanding. And the same thing goes for the First World War. There were Gurkhas at Gallipoli, for example. Everywhere they fought for Britain was brilliant. On Delhi Ridge in 1857 during the Indian Mutiny, the people holding it were the Gurkhas and the 60th Rifles of the British Army, and they were outnumbered like 10-1 by the mutineers, who were trained soldiers. They were mostly ex-British sepoys who had rebelled, and they held that ridge just pure guts and courage, man. The two units together. I'm never going to have a bad word said about the Gurkhas, and there's no bad word to say about them. Like, you know, I remember when I was in the army, when I was like 19. And I don't recommend this to anyone. Going into pubs in Aldershot on a Saturday night, right? And the one people that a big group of drunk paras wouldn't try and pick on, who were squaddies, soldiers, would be a group of like 4 or 5 Gurkhas in sports jackets and ties, which is how they dress or how they used to dress when they were off duty. The one group of really big drunk group of paras wouldn't try and pick on would be 5 or 6 Gurkhas sitting in the corner of a pub somewhere. And they never caused any trouble. They were always nice people. They didn't do nasty things to English chicks or anything like that. They're good guys. Sorry, they just are.
Leibstadt under Iron Duke was apparently the best regiment I've learnt, according to the comments.
Well, that would have been the Queen's regiment, but yeah, okay, fair enough. Whatever. Okay, so has somebody got anything else to bring up? Because if not, I'm going to move on to HMS Defender.
Well, someone's just popping a squat. Someone's popping a squat on Bomber Command and strategic bombing.
I haven't seen it. Where is
strategic? Suno Samar. Don't talk about Bomber Command. Strategic bombing is the stupidest military idea ever.
Well, yeah, militarily, I don't disagree with that, but the 57,000 blokes of Bomber Command, mostly British, but also Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, and South Africans, who got killed in World War II, were very brave blokes doing their best and doing what they were told to do.
I mean, I would personally disagree. There's a great book called by James Holland called Big Week, which describes how...
I know, I've read that book. It's mostly about the Yanks, but yeah, I've read it.
It's mostly about the Yanks, but it's the importance... It shows the effectiveness of targeting military assets using bombing...
yeah, but that wasn't mostly what was done. What was mostly done was bombing the shit out of cities, really. And don't, for a minute, the Americans did it to some degree in Europe. They try and say they didn't, but they did. Particularly because, like, your northern bomb site that the Americans were so proud of isn't much use through cloud, and Europe's very often cloudy. But also, they totally did it against Japan. Like, they fire near enough every city in Japan. So don't go away with this thing that the Yanks try and do sometimes. Oh, no, we didn't do that. Yeah, they did. But my point is not that it was whether it was militarily effective or not. I don't think it was for the most part. Strategic bombing, I think, is a big con. But because you are basically killing women and kids and blowing up houses and a few factories, you know.
But could it be said that doing that shatters the morale of the enemy to resist? I mean, if their relatives
it didn't, not really,
children...
Because look what happened in the Blitz in London, and the German bombing of Coventry and all this.
I suppose the circumstance, doesn't it?
It tends to make the civilians actually more determined to fight.
Right, but that's also because the Germans weren't very good at bombing anything. We were just better.
Well, we had bigger aircraft that could carry bigger bomb loads.
Yeah,
but
let's be honest as well. Bombing civilians is pretty based.
I'm not going to agree with that. But anyway, but also, like I said, 57,000 Bomber Command guys died in World War II. Being in Bomber Command in World War II was the most dangerous job you could do in the British forces. By far, vastly more dangerous than being in the army, vastly more dangerous than being in the Navy. And the Navy was vastly more effective, and the Army was, the Army was the Army in World War II. British Army in World War II wasn't their finest hour, let's put it that way.
I think something else as well that cropped up in chat is people were saying, like, well, they weren't really bombing military installations, but in like a total war scenario, it isn't just pure military installations. Loads of infrastructure becomes part of the military de facto.
Look, I like I said, I think the blokes in Bomber Command were extremely brave. They were like the risks they took were enormous. You had to do 30 operations in Bomber Command. The Americans, you did 25 ops, and then you went back home to America, and that was it. You were finished. In Bomber Command, you did 30 operations, and if you survived them, and statistically you were unlikely to, you then got a break training people, which was also very dangerous because you were training these guys who weren't all that great, and then you had to go and do another 20 operations, And statistically, your chances of surviving that 50 operations plus the training bit in the middle were almost zero. In fact, they were probably less than zero statistically. They were very, very brave men. The German flak, and particularly the German night flyers, were extremely deadly. Like really, really dangerous. And all you had in the British bomber was 303 machine guns to fire back if you could see them. The Germans even had night flyers that had two 20 or 30 millimeter cannon that fired upwards, so that the German night flyer could fire underneath the Lancaster or the Halifax or whatever it was, and the Brits had a rear gunner, and if the rear gunner didn't spot them, and he might not because he was freezing cold most of the time, if he didn't, they just flew underneath the bomber and blew it to bits.
Yeah, those tail gunners got the worst of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Even getting out of that turret, if your aircraft was hit, was almost impossible. They were the bravest of the brave. I'm not going to say a word about Bomber Command. They were really, really brave. Whether it was a good thing to do, whether Britain should have put all that resources into it, that's a totally different matter.
Yeah, pick up
If you could just go back to the
British Bake Off Harris.
If you just go back to the subject of sort of strategic bombing of civilian populations, you could say that it does sort of strengthen civilian resolve, but you could also bring up examples like the Rotterdam Blitz. This nearly single-handedly caused the Dutch government to capitulate against the German forces. I mean, that's a successful example.
The Dutch government, although Faust wouldn't agree with me, the Dutch government in World War II was so weak, it was unbelievable, man. I mean, come on.
And you've also got to remember that it's the government that surrendered. You know,
told its soldiers to stop fighting. Absolutely right.
You know, there weren't people lining up in anti-lockdown protests to say surrender to the Germans. I think that's probably the bit of nuance I would add to it.
Look, the Germans started this area bombing of seas. The Germans started it. It wasn't the British. You know, my father's place in London was bombed flat by the Germans. It was just lucky they were in the air raid shower. Like a public air raid shower down the road.
Because I looked into this a while ago about the history of sort of aerial bombings. And there's a bit of contention over whether it started by the Germans in World War One.
Germans in World War One, firstly with the Zeppelins, and then later on with Gotha bombers and this kind of stuff.
Right, because Kahindi Andrews was on GMTV a while ago, maybe a year.
Well, this is that black anti-British scumbag.
Yeah, and he pushed the idea that Britain started the idea of city bombings, and literally nothing. He was never corrected on that. Nothing was said to the contrary.
Yeah, but I mean, like, why does he get on British TV shows?
Who's the name of this chap?
Kahindi Andrews. He's a vile anti-British black guy.
Kahindi Andrews.
Shut up! Rudy!
How do you spell the Kahindi?
Kehinde.
Oh, Kahindi Andrews. Yeah. Oh, he doesn't look very nice.
No.
Oh,
he's a professor of black studies. He's not a historian.
No. But he gets invited.
Oh, I don't know this bloke. I remember.
Yeah, he's an anti-British scumbag, basically. I mean, I would turn around and say to him, if you hate the country so much, then fuck off, frankly.
I just remember one time that they got him on. I can't remember what it was on. And they tried to do this thing where he had to debate someone blind about why the English flag was racist. And he got dunked on by some 17-year-olds. And he ended up just having to go, well, what about the Crusades? It's like, oh, brilliant, well done.
What about the Crusades?
Well, the Crusades were a long delayed counterattack against hundreds of years of Islamic aggression.
Yeah, and we didn't even have the St. George's Cross when we went off to the Crusades.
I genuinely wonder if an effective response to all these people who who attempt to bludgeon people with this, like, oh, your history's bad. I genuinely wonder if the best response is there a problem? Because at
Problem
this
with
point,
that.
yeah, it's just because at this point in time, like, I think you kind of look weak by like justifying it by going, oh, well, the British Empire did all this great stuff, or oh, well, the Crusades were a counterattack. I'm just kind of happy to say, yeah, is there a problem, mate?
Well, there was a guy on
Well,
Talk
I
Radio
think
the other day.
I think you've got to take it both ways. You've got to say, yeah, British Empire did loads of great stuff. Yeah, the Crusades were a counterattack. But you've also got to turn around and say that, and so what?
Well, there was a guy on Talk Radio the other day. They were talking about a statue that was going to that some people were trying to get taken down, and this guy was trying to highlight the context around like why this guy was actually a good guy. And this guy, something Sullivan, which I was kind of surprised at, who's like the radio guy who works for Talk Radio, was like was basically like, no, you don't have to explain anything. Just say no, it's not coming down. Tough shit, get on with it. And in my mind, I was just thinking, never apologise, never apologise.
Yeah, it's part of British history. It's staying there. Get fucked. Don't like it? Go leave. Simple as that. Don't like it? Leave.
I mean, of course, because my dad grew up in Rhodesia, he's a bit of a Cecil Rhodes apologist. And someone brought up Cecil Rhodes. We were just me and him ran into a few strangers, and the stranger said, "Oh, well, wasn't Cecil Rhodes so bad?" And my dad was like, "No, he was glorious. Just painted the world red. It's great." And then no one decided to go bring it up any further because no one was apologizing for it. He was just like, "Yeah, he's great," innit? Move on.
Yep. Totally agree. He was great. Rhodesia was one of the best countries in Africa until it was taken over by Robert Mugabe and his communists. And look at the state of the shit all now. I mean, that's all you've got to look at, really.
Yeah, I mean that is
go right now.
All right, see you, fella.
Go on, mate. Go on. Yeah, I mean, look, I remember when I lived in South Africa, like if you went for a holiday up into, as it then was, Zimbabwe, you could take an old transistor radio and sell it for like 5 times what it was worth because they couldn't even buy those things up there because of Mugabe.
Yeah, but just going back to the issue of like no apologies, I genuinely think you look weak if you're like going, well, we did all these nice things. I think you start looking like an apologist. I think the better approach is genuinely just saying, I really don't care, mate. Have a nice day. because if someone's
to some degree, I agree with that.
Because you know, I mean, of course, slavery isn't the reason Africa's poor. But or the Caribbean islands. But someone says the UK owes them £1 trillion or something like that. But like, wouldn't it just be so much better than like, you know, coming up with, well, actually, this economic study says this. So you just say, I really don't care. I don't care. Deal with it.
Yeah, no, I totally look. I sometimes will point out things like, you know, the main people who stopped slavery in the 19th century. Slavery was like every human race and nation and state had slavery always up until the 19th century.
I will go one up on that. I bet you, if you go far back enough in your ancestry, you have both slave owners and slaves.
Yeah, nearly everyone. Nearly everyone. Yeah.
Nearly everyone, if not everyone.
Yeah, so, absolutely right. Yeah, because it was just common currency for humans. There were slaves. And I mean, even today in Africa and Arabia and parts of Asia, there are slaves. But the only people who ever stopped it, and the first people who ever stopped it, were the British. That's just a fact. Now, okay, you could therefore accuse me, I suppose, of like, oh, somehow I'm using like liberal arguments. I know sometimes I think Sojo thinks I do that. And he might be right. But on the other hand, it's true. You know, it's just the truth. the first people to stop that shit were the British. Like, slavery wasn't legal in Britain, really. Certain absolute layers from 1780, it was impossible to have a slave in Britain. It was totally illegal to have a slave in Britain in 1780. We banned the slave trade in 1807 and enforced it with the Royal Navy at some considerable cost in blood and treasure. And then in 1833, the slave trade was banned in the whole of the British Empire, which was then something over a quarter of the world.
Right, but as someone just said in chat, we stopped slavery in Africa and now they hate us. Like, I mean, all those people died in the West Africa Squadron, so their ancestors could be dispossessed and disenfranchised in their own homeland for something which they didn't do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm not disagreeing with that at all, Alan. And like I said, you can argue that is like going with this liberal lefty shit argument stuff, but it's the truth.
Mm.
No one else banned it. No one else enforced banning it. So, you know, I don't know. I think on the one hand, you got to tell the truth, but on the other hand, as you say, and as Ozzy correctly said just now, on the other hand, you got to turn around and say, well, I don't give a shit either. You know, you look at our history and you take it for what it is. You like it or you don't like it, and if you don't like it, fuck off.
Yeah, I think I'm back. I've got my food. I think the appropriate answer to this in the modern world would be yes, the British Empire and the Royal Navy did spend a lot of time, money and effort and blood and treasure to stop slavery, and it was a fucking waste of time. Fuck you. I mean, that's basically my position.
That's my exact same view, to be honest. It's just like,
yeah.
No, like, no.
Why did we bother? Why did we bother? We're now the evil straight white men.
You know, I think you finally come over to my position on the empire. I think you finally got it.
No, I always got it. I just I always got it, but I just don't see how people are so thick that they can't see what they're actually talking about. But then, you know, most people have almost no understanding of history, you know?
Well, I mean, like 1 in 6 people have an IQ that would leave them clinically retarded. So,
yeah, true.
The fact that we live in a society that makes people believe they can all be these great free-thinking individuals is kind of dumb.
That's below 85. It's borderline. Yeah. So, sorry, just thinking about numbers and stuff.
You're probably better on these numbers than I am. But yeah, it's something like, what is it? 15% of the population have an IQ of 88 or below.
No, that's wrong. Or is it actually? No, you're right. It's 15%. Yeah, 15% is right.
And it's going up. Our IQ is dropping.
Well, I mean, it depends, because the thing is about IQ is that it's renormed. So it's a tricky little statistic, because it always seems that Britain's IQ is 100, even though from a real perspective, we're probably about 3 or 4 points more stupid than we were in the 1950s.
Yeah, and probably what, 5-6% more stupid than we were in the 1900s.
The best guess we have is that a Victorian, the average Victorian in the 1850s had an IQ of 107, and it's never been higher.
Pretty damn
very
high,
impressive. It's
yeah,
very
it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Wait, what was it? I missed that.
100. So in the 1850s, the average person would have probably had an IQ around 107 of what we compare it to today.
For an average, that's damn high.
And that's based on, is that based on reaction times? That's essentially the purest measurement.
Partly. So it's also based on, so there is this statistical technique you can use called linear interpolation, and that's basically what we've done is you can take the genomes of people, you can observe how much it's declining at a certain point, and then you can figure out how smart people would have been approximately in the 1850s. on that basis. Yeah, so that's around the level of Asia, like Asia right now as it's industrializing. Of course, Asia is now only going to fall as well because they're no longer under selection. Dutton said the average Victorian
ain't gonna fall like it's not gonna fall like
that's
it's not gonna fall like us.
Believe, yeah, Kedmon, I don't believe Dutton on that. I think that's a fucking extraordinary statistic. Woodley of Manise papers generally suggest something around 107 to 109. You can go with 109 if you guys want. I mean, listen, even 109 as an average IQ is brilliant. It's astounding.
You know?
It's astounding.
Yeah.
I've heard that number somewhere before.
Yeah,
it is just below the average bachelor degree graduate. These days, I'm not saying huge things about bachelor degree people in the modern era, but they're not complete thickos. So...
do you know what? Aussie, I'd be amazed if the average bachelor degree these days was 109. Sounds a bit high.
It's 115.
I'd be amazed if it was that high, actually.
You've got to bear in mind, though, that you're mixing and matching a lot of degrees.
Okay, so you're getting guys who've got 150 IQs with people who are low.
And they're doing astrophysics and things like that. But you're also mixing them in with people in social studies and education who are probably sitting in the 103, 104 range.
I could be totally wrong about this, okay, but I have the general impression that a lot of people who go through university these days and get a BA, particularly if it's in something like gender studies or some bollocks like that, probably have an IQ that doesn't actually need to be much above 100.
I mean, there are certain elements of degrees that are quite you can't be a complete empty head, because you've got to be able to string, even in those studies things, you've got to be able to write essays, and essays basically involve writing coherent structures of argument and coherent levels of logic.
Okay, so why do I constantly hear people, like right-wing people, the tiny number who are left at university, saying that they have to teach their students how to write intelligible English even?
I mean, maybe
and I don't hear that occasionally.
I'm a student.
I don't hear it occasionally. I hear it from everybody.
I'm a student myself. I've talked to quite a lot of people who are in the what you might consider softer skull degrees, like sociology and all that sort of stuff. I mean, sure, they might not be as bright as the physicists. Physicists that I know, or the people studying medicine. But I mean, they're not completely, they're not like drooling at the mouth. They're just
no. I'm not suggesting that they're like guys with, IQs of 85, but they're probably only just about average. Many of these people.
Yeah. Yes. You've got to remember that these are average scores, and average means that there is a lot of people below as well as above that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Max Weber was a sociologist, and so is this chap we were just discussing, Kahindi Andrews. So you can.
I'd be amazed. I'd be amazed if his IQ was above 120.
Yeah,
really amazed.
But yeah. So anyway, that's me. That's enough of me spewing about this stuff.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I think you're right. Sergio, I'd be interested in see what you think about that stuff. I mean, you're a pretty high IQ guy, I would reckon.
Am I?
I'd be surprised if you weren't. Put it that way.
What is it you would specifically like me to comment on?
Well, I'm just thinking. Well, what do you think of this? The average IQ, in terms of now compared with 100 years ago, and also like the average IQ of many of these people going through university now and getting like really shit degrees in gender studies or whatever crap they're doing.
Well, I can't really make any comment about the statistics and the data because it's something that I'm not really aware of. I mean, I've heard it sort of anecdotally from people like Dutton that this is the case, but the thing is, I'm actually really turned off. I'm really turned off by sort of talk of IQ and race. It's because it's just very empirical and practical and pragmatic and efficient, and these are all the values that I actually kind of resent now. I want a world that's more not rational. Almost in many ways, you know, I would love to live amongst the people that believe in sort of crazy myths and legends and bullshit. Not people who are, you know, this sort of, you know, the sort of the midwit. I suppose you have to say the midwit. I don't, you know, there's this proliferation of the midwit.
The dangerous midwit. Mm.
The dangerous midwit. Where,
the guy with the 105 IQ, yeah.
But it's not just that. I mean, I would imagine that these kind of people always existed. It was just that their opinions were known to be of no importance and were treated as such. But now everybody's has an opinion. Everybody's opinion is worth the same as everybody else's, and that's just nonsense.
Well, you've got to remember that for the longest period of time, whenever we found a smart person, we shoved them in a monastery and make sure they never had a kid. So I do get that, and there is everyone should be very cautious about overvaluing this thing called intelligence, because intelligence is unironically, people who are very smart are almost always the dumbest, because you get really, really, really smart people like Karl Marx, and they come up with the dumbest stuff in the world.
How do you know Karl Marx was really smart?
Oh, if you can read through Das Kapital, I've
read it, but I didn't find it really smart.
I mean, he's using a lot of things like the Socratic dialect, and is that the Socratic dialect? I can't remember, but he was using a lot of philosophical techniques that are quite impressive, and you don't see everywhere. And he uses it to basically come to the conclusion that you should kill rich people, and like it's just. I mean, people who are very smart often come up with just some really, really bad ideas, and often it's the more humble folk who say, "Well, I don't like him, which is why I'm the way I am." Who you should probably end up listening to.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Can I ask you a question here, Ozzy? Because like I'm honestly interested in this.
Okay.
Do you think it was the case that in years gone by, a lot of very smart people also had, let me think of the right term here, they also had beliefs which were not from their smart side?
Let
me try and give you a more exact example.
Okay.
Someone like, say, the Duke of Wellington, let's say, okay, or Nelson, for example. Obviously, very, very smart blokes, but I think whilst they had that smart layer and a high IQ and all this kind of stuff, they also had a layer underneath that, or maybe level with that, you know, they had to support their king, they had to support their nation, and they kind of had like higher beliefs, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
You know?
So
and probably religious stuff too, as well.
So you have the irrational and the rational. I understand.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say. You in the past, I think these very intelligent guys, they had this rational high IQ stuff, but they had irrational beliefs, which were also just as important, and they were just as important in keeping them based, as we say these days.
So one of the things I would probably wager that just about all of the greatest Britons I can think of had a faith of sorts. Particularly to my mind, though, the one that falls immediately, as you were talking about this, was Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton is undoubtedly one of the greatest geniuses of all time, and he spent most of his life saying, "I do all of this for God. This is all about God." He also
loved England.
He loved, and he was. I think for most people, for a healthy Christian, if you love God, you will love your nation.
Yeah.
Because God chose you to be born there, so He clearly thinks that this country is best for you, and you are best for this country. And I mean, of course, God created people and nations, so nations are therefore sovereign and shouldn't be toyed with as the people above us like to think. But I think inbuilt with a lot of people is this idea that a lot of the smart people of the past was not this over rationalization, and this sort of like, I pursue knowledge for knowledge itself. Most people think of it in the past who have been of great repute said, "I do this for king and country and thereby God."
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that.
He
was a bit of a heretic, but I mean, he was very smart and.
but it's like Nelson saying like he wasn't cold because his love of his king and country kept him warm. Like he would actually say shit like that, and it was true for those guys. Like Wellington could be a cold bastard. He really could be. Yeah. Well, I admire Wellington hugely. Obviously, look at my avatar. But I think he was the greatest British soldier ever. But he could be enormously cold. But on the other hand, he knew damn well that 3 British battalions would be 6 Sikh battalions in the English Sikh War, for example, just because of their grit and courage and their discipline.
Yeah.
He knew this.
The other thing
that wasn't rational. That was just because he knew the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, that I would caution is thinking that the greatest leaders in British or English or whatever history are necessarily the smartest. Some of the greatest figureheads I admire most, like George VI, they weren't brilliant academics coming up with amazing theories or whatever. They were just good British people. And they did their part for the country.
This is the Queen's mum you're talking, the Queen's father you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think George.
Yeah, I think he was a good man. I think he was a good man.
And his brother, who was, in many ways a more gifted man, proved up to be morally of just completely inferior worth. So I'm really
his brother was an arsehole, and King George VI was a good bloke.
So in many ways. So in many ways, I'm kind of sympathetic with Sojo's perspective that like you really should avoid like fetishizing smart people, because in many ways, smart people are dumber than stupid people, and stupid people are smarter than smart people.
I totally see what you're saying, and I agree with you. And I think King George VI was a very good man. Like I said, he was a naval officer who fought in the Battle of Jutland, which was the biggest battleship battle there ever was in history. He was no coward. He did exactly what he was told to do. Never forward, did his stuff. And in World War II, I think he was a good figurehead. But you also got to look at King George VI was not like, I would have fucking punched Patton for turning around and saying King George V was a moron, which he did. But then, Patton used to go around slapping American soldiers who got battle fatigue or whatever you want to call it. But and everyone these days tries to make out Patton was a great bloke. Well, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, a general walking around in World War II with 2 pearl-handle revolvers to me is a bit gay, but that's just me. But I'm an Englishman, So anyway, but you look at the real leaders. You look at people like Wellington for sure, Nelson for sure, guys like fucking what's his name? I can't remember now. The bloke who was the leader of the Grand Fleet in World War One. Excellent.
BT?
No, not B. B was an idiot. But
wasn't Fisher? Oh goodness, yeah, his name escapes me as well.
Yeah, me too. It'll come to me in a minute. When I get it, I'll tell you. But anyway, Jellicoe, John Jellicoe.
Yes, Jellicoe. Oh, yes.
Jellicoe, John Jellicoe, brilliant bloke, brilliant bloke. Very brave. Like he fought in all these little colonial wars all over the place. Sometimes as an infantryman. Thank you, Mitch Jellicoe. You're quite right. But anyway, he'd fought in all these little colonial wars all over the place. Very brave bloke, brilliant gunnery officer, and absolutely like a technical genius kind of guy. But he also totally believed in Britain. He totally believed in the Royal Navy. He totally believed in all the sailors in the Royal Navy. You have to have the two combined. Like, to be really great, you have to have those two things combined. You have to have that technical story, but you also have to believe in your own damn people. There has to be this mythical bit. It's like, I'm not a big fantasy fan, all right? But I like Tolkien. And I like Tolkien because Tolkien was an Englishman, obviously. He was a devout Christian. He was a professor of Anglo-Saxon, and he deliberately wrote The Lord of the Rings as British myth and high fantasy because he thought that we'd lost most of it because of bloody the Norman Conquest.
But again, it's deliberate, premeditated, rational. It doesn't. It's not natural.
But underneath it,
I know what I understand what he's trying to get at, but it's just like it's trying to force it, artificially recreate it, and it's no. I don't think it's possible.
Oh, you're talking about the myth.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I get that.
It's sort of bootstrapped. There's nothing, it's just, it comes out of a liberal time. What can one expect? I mean, not to take away from the great work.
But having said that, of course, Tolkien was also a British soldier who fought on the Somme in 1916. So he kind of did as well as looked at it,
I honestly think that the era where this was all synthesized into monumental greatness would have been the Elizabethan period in the English Renaissance, when you've got
that's when it started. That's when it started. Yeah.
No, that's really where it that's the apex and its nadir, and it was all downhill since then. Because
I don't agree with that.
Of course, how can you? What do you mean you don't agree with it? Since then, it's been downhill. Liberalism, utilitarianism, pragmatism, rationalism, all of this stuff is cancer to the spirit and body, in my view.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but
if you look at somebody like John Dee, who was a brilliant academic, but at the same time was an occultist, believed in tried to work out alchemy, was into hermeneutics, all this kind of crazy stuff. It's just
what's hermeneutics, by the way?
It's kind of like a take on it's kind of like a take on on medicine from it's like homeopathy. It's the precursor to homeopathy, basically.
Fair enough.
And also things like investigating astronomy for astrological purposes, like star signs. All of this is sort of like cancer to the modern mind. But I feel a real I want to believe this. I want to be sort of sucked into that fantasy because it probably leads to a richer life than the kind of crap we're living now.
I mean, what I would put on its head, though, is that for many people, they thought this was objectively true.
Yeah, they had overwhelming belief, which we don't have. But everything has to be sort of justified and evidence-based, whereas they just believe this stuff. It's deeply and strongly.
Hang on. Sojo, I would say to you that might have been true 20 years ago, but I think these days...
20 years ago?
Yeah, I know.
People did not...
No, hang on.
No way.
Let me finish. I think 20 years ago, that's probably right. But now, I think we're getting, like, evidence-based stuff is getting destroyed now. In science,
Yes.
even. We're going
Yes.
on models these days, not evidence and experiments. We just go on computer models, which has been proved time and time again, not least over climate change and China virus, are absolute bollocks.
It's very, very interesting that you bring this up because I look at the left and actually there is this element of actually there's nothing rational about this. There's nothing evidence-based about it. There's no empiricism and there's no scientific study going on here. This is pure belief. It's almost like they're in their own sort of renaissance of like a
Absolutely
sort of
right. Yep.
it's a left-wing fanaticism.
The left is a religion.
Like, yeah, they've got a fanaticism that I wish that I had, just in a different formulation, transfigured in a different way, more hardcore, natural.
Yeah,
actually based in the natural world.
Yeah, I mean, Dutton described Black Lives Matter as a religious reawakening, and I think it's very fitting actually because they have this martyr, whether he was rightfully or wrongfully placed as a martyr, and all of a sudden this huge upsurge, and people marching across the streets, people crying, people are completely bereft over some guy they never knew who overdosed from fentanyl. It's absolutely astounding. I definitely do St. George. Yeah, I do get that. There is a genuine case to say that in many ways political ideology, and I guess you could say left-wing ideology by an insinuation of that can kind of lead to a form of religion. And I think that's pretty. I think that's a pretty interesting perspective, and the leftists do seem to encapsulate that much better than right-wing people do. Wokeism will overtake. It already has, Kedmon. Wokeism is the predominant religion at the moment. I'm not sure if you haven't noticed, but most companies are talking about, with this, we are very about inclusivity and blah blah blah. You don't see any of them talking about, we center our business around Christ. I mean, who does? I think only Chick-fil-A does that these days. So, I'm not abashed as a Christian of saying wokeism has completely kicked us in the nuts. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it's just destroying us, basically.
Yeah.
But also, Duke,
it's being encouraged by the people who run us.
Duke, but I increasingly find myself wanting to reject basically mass society and even the idea of nationalism because it's like I just find it to be inadequate.
It's
don't see.
It's hard, Sojo. It's hard. I find it hard. I find it hard. I find it difficult. I find it pushing uphill constantly.
I don't think it's the real position. I think it's a hiding to nothing actually.
Well, you might be right, but I'm going to carry on doing it because, I don't know. It's kind of coming back to what I was saying about the great British leaders in the past, and I'm not for 1 second suggesting that I'm anything like that because I'm not. But the great British leaders in the past had a basic belief in Britain and the British people, which I don't think any of our leaders have anymore. And would even understand if you try to explain it to them. Like you could probably get that like a wet fish and slap it around Alexander Johnson's face, and he wouldn't even understand what you were talking about. But I don't think we can lose that, because if we do, I fear for us. But yeah, it's hard work, mate. It is. It's really hard work.
I'm brought back to that myth. I can't remember who the god is, but it's the myth of that that man who's cursed, but he's from the Titans and the Olympians.
The guy who gets his liver eaten out every
day. He has to consistently roll the ball up the hill, and he knows it's going to go down. He knows it's going to go down, but he does it anyway.
Yep.
And this is why I'm wary of defeatism, because in many ways he is an icon of what it means to be a man. It's, that ball's going to go down again, but you just pick yourself up and you carry on, because it's all you can do.
This is like
Sisyphus.
Right. Yes, Sisyphus. But this is why I actually like Sojo. People sometimes don't think I do, because we get into arguments sometimes.
Hang on a minute.
Discussions.
Hang on a minute. This is a British stream. We're all friends here. I consider you all friends. This is an Old Commonwealth stream and Nepal. And if you don't like it, you can fuck off.
Yeah, I said that. I said that on our Discord, and I stick to it. And listen, I actually like Sojo, or always have liked Sojo. He's a very intelligent bloke. He's making his way in the world pretty successfully, so far as I can tell. He's not scared to cast off the anchor and go off into foreign parts and do his own stuff. So I really admire him. But on the other hand, he's the sort of bloke, as a British man, we really need on our side. Which is why I'm not going to fall out of him partly. Not mainly, because mainly I just like him anyway. But I would really like to keep him on our side, because I think he's the sort of bloke we need on our side, because he's a good example to younger fellas. And like Sojo is a fair bit younger than me, but he's older than most of the other guys who come on the stream.
Mm.
And Sojo can go ha 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 in the chat, because he will. But actually, I like Sojo.
That wasn't directed at you. It's Sunos Hamar for his comment.
He's pulling.
Fair enough.
Pulling a wee jab.
Pulling your leg. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't have a Gurkha or a Sojo poster on my wall. When I was much younger, I used to have cute cheeky babes posters on my walls. These days, I've got about 5 pictures on my walls, and they're mostly ships and lighthouses and really boring kind of like boomer stuff. But they're British, so they're cool, or Australian, so they're cool.
I'd like to get back to my sort of critique of nationalism, actually, in a way, because it's like I just find it very actually detached and stale and abstract. Actually, like the abstract idea of the nation. I think that may work. That may have meaning to an individual on a smaller scale, but when you start to scale up countries into the tens of millions, hundreds of millions, how can anyone claim that like America or China is like this sort of one entity?
I'm not an American or a Chinese.
Yeah, but I think you're missing the point. It's like sort of this personification of a country that really is now just simply demarcated by its international boundaries and the institutions that govern over it. I just feel that it's lacking something now, and it's
yeah. So if I'm understanding it, what you're basically saying is that when it's tribalism, it makes a lot of sense because it's your tribe. But as you get into several orders of magnitude of abstraction, I don't really know my neighbors now, but in the before time, I would have known my neighbors, but I may not have known the people, across the valley. as time has gone on, our level of abstraction of our in-group is now no longer.
The nation is as high as you can go, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I mean, it's like in America, you know, everyone used to identify as, well, I'm from Virginia, and I always will be from Virginia. None of them ever said I'm an American.
Yeah.
And it's just as time has gone on, our levels we've been defaulting to higher levels of abstraction. And of course, the end result of that is the globe, unfortunately.
All right, I'm going to ask for some common sense now. Adam, what do you think about this stuff?
Yeah, no, I mostly agree. I don't think nationalism as it is now is on a road to winning anything.
Oh no,
I do think
no, it ain't. Yeah.
I think it needs to reorientate quite drastically. I'm not entirely sure what into. I'll be honest though, something someone said earlier. I'm not really sure I like this idea of comparing the modern left to a religion. I've always kind of found that like a bit of a liberal cope. Because generally religions are born out of a society that's on the up, that's looking for some order. And
I'm not trying to say it's a religion in like, oh, well, it's religion because it's wrong. I mean, I'm a religious man myself. It's less of that. It's more sort of the way people are motivated and the way they see themselves as a part of a bigger whole is very different between leftism and rightism.
Right, but I don't see how, I don't know. There's just something there. Like there's something that I just think's missing from that comparison.
Yeah, there is. You're right, Armin. There is, but I see where it comes from though, because they have like this kind of. I think where it comes from is the left has this kind of fanatical belief in nonsense, and I think that's the reason that people conflate it with religions. It's actually nonsense is the wrong word.
I was going to say you're treading on thin ice here.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, listen, I'm an agnostic, mate, so I can do that. But
patience and agnostic kingdom.
Yeah, but what I mean is, I don't mean nonsense. What I mean is something that isn't
obviously falsifiable.
Yeah, there's no scientific proof of it. You know what I mean?
I mean, what I would the take I would just say is that there are just loads of attributes of leftism that just seem very religious, and of course, like I'm religious myself, but like, you know, they have dogmas that you can't really question.
Climate change, that kind of stuff.
And you know, inequality is bad, and you know, as you get further down it, you know, you get your critical race theory dogmas, like all white people are racist, all men are sexist, all that sort of thing.
Straight white men are all evil.
You've got blasphemy laws and things like that. Like there are things that you can't say. It's all very characteristic of what I would describe as religion.
Absolutely right.
And it's not necessarily, it's not, you know, I'm not trying to condemn it because, like, you know, religion, just because something's a religion doesn't mean it's wrong. Leftism is wrong because it's leftist, not because it's religious. But but that would be my defending argument at the very least.
Yeah, I reckon you make some good points there, Ozzy. Adam, what do you reckon?
Yeah, yeah, I suppose. I don't know.
Look,
I think there's a better way of doing it.
Yeah, I think he's correct. I think what Ozzy just said is totally correct. And I think you're right too, because like it's not a real religion. Obviously, it's not, because there's no core belief or anything like that. I mean, if there is a core belief, it's that, you know, every child ought to be able to change sex at 5, and adults should be able to have sex with kids. I've written that if you really push the leftist woke idea, that's where it goes. Obviously.
Well, I mean, all religions usually kind of share this sort of idea of, I'm not sure if introspection's the right word.
It's greater power, maybe?
Well, it's sort of everything has to emanate from the within, which sort of leftism doesn't have at all. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But
I
see
I think it does, but only for the sinning class. Because you get a lot of that sort of like, you constantly need to check your privilege. You constantly need to make how are you being a good ally? Blah 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 blah. I think there's quite a lot of, and you know, people say, and like there's that thing of like, even people who actively try not be racist are racist and things like that. Like there is this sort of element of you are faulty no matter what. But it's, of course, it's only applied to white people. But I mean,
and especially straight white men, of course.
Yeah, sure. But
I mean, also you've got.
I don't want to hammer home this point though. I just because all I was basically saying was that I find the BLM protests of the last summer very kind of similar to the way in which Billy Graham ignited crowds after the post-war. I'm not trying to make any sort of judgments about the ideology on that basis.
Yeah, I'm probably just making too much out of it, but I don't know.
Sojo, you got anything on that one?
There's one thing that sort of strikes me about modern leftism, and because I look at the sort of transgender thing and really think to myself, this is a kind of transhumanism, and what they're getting at is that they want to transcend what it means to be a human.
Yeah,
and I think there's kind of, to my mind, there's kind of like religious undertones to that, like transcending being a human, reaching something that's beyond the sort of the material realm, changing who they are. I think there's
transcending the sin of the flesh.
Right, exactly. Sort of there's something there that's sort of religious-like to my mind in a way.
But it's also grossly materialistic in the way they envision it, because it's like, you know, you have nanobots going through your genome, tweaking genes, and you start inserting robotic parts into you and things like that.
But wouldn't the ultimate end goal of transhumanism to be basically, you know, sort of transplanted into the cloud and into the ether and become just a couple of, you know, electrons buzzing around that in physics aren't even actual physical properties, something like that?
Yeah, I get what you mean. It just sounds nightmarish to me. It's just,
the left is pretty nightmarish, let's be honest.
Although
we say that.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go on, Ozzy.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, although to be honest, I find most religions' salvation, apart from my own, nightmarish. I mean, Islam's version of salvation is basically you get really, really pretty women and you eat better food the rest of your life. Like, that's not heaven to me. That's just absurd amounts of pleasantry. Anyway.
I'm not even going to pretend I know what heaven is supposed to be, but
yeah, exactly. That's the point.
Yeah,
the Islamic paradise is quite shallow anyway.
Yeah, the 21 versions for blowing up loads of kids is like always struck me as not a good idea, but you know.
I mean, but you even see there's some of this within this sort of shallowness in belief within like modern Christians, which is kind of painful to see, because I think Sojo might have pointed out in I don't know if it was controversial or not, a tweet where you were pointing out the amount of sort of ethos that jump from religion to religion, denomination to denomination.
Pick and mix Christians, as I put it. Yeah, I'm an atheist, and then I become an Anglican. It's not. It's a bit too liberal for me. Then I'll try the Catholic Church. You'll know he's kissing some black man's feet, and then you find yourself at Orthodoxy. And what's to say that these guys aren't going to basically become Muslims? I mean, it seems entirely plausible to my mind.
I mean, it's one of the funny things is that one of the biggest sort of Christian arguments to pop up a lot over the years has been that, there's like an element of suffering that is about putting yourself through a challenge, and
Yeah.
people are like, oh, but the Anglican Church is paused. It's like, yeah, this is your challenge. This is your
That's always been my view. It's like you've got to sit through that minister talking absolute dog shit, and you're going to sit there, you're going to bite your tongue and say, "This is my test. Lord, give me strength."
Yeah, but instead these people are now like, oh no, I've just got to change denomination, and I'm sure there are plenty of good reasons why certain people change denomination. I mean, I've thought about it a few times, but I don't know. I just.
But can't you look? I'm not a religious guy. I'm an agnostic, as I said. But is it not perfectly possible to like change your actual church within the same denomination?
You can, and there are like some good ones around. I mean, for me, the problem is, I mean, I live in the southeast. That's not like a huge secret. I'm very much under the purview of Justin Welby. Everything around every church around here is immensely paused. I mean, we literally had a Muslim imam come to my church, in the last couple of months and give a sermon. And I had to sit there and listen to all this bollocks about Christianity is actually just about learning to love one another and this and the other. And that's kind of as deep as they can go. And of course he's standing there next to a woman vicar. So
yeah. Look, I haven't. My last mixing with the Church of England ever was a Church of England vicar like 30 years ago, and like he was an ex-RAF Shackleton pilot and a really cool bass guy. But like he didn't believe in women vicars and or any of that shit, basically. So I suppose if you read what's his name, who we often talk about, whose brother died, he talks about how difficult it was to find a reasonable Church of England church. But he did eventually. Yeah, he eventually found a reasonable Church of England church. This is one reason why I got fucked off when AA did his Christian stream and he didn't have the Church of England in there. And part of that was that like there is the High Church of England still. It's a very much minority bit of the Church of England, but it's still there. And he should have had that represented, in my view.
You know what? I remember that stream, and there's something very telling about what he said. He said, "Oh, the Anglican Church is so paused that we're not even going to bother having it on the stream." That was pretty much what he said. And this is a strain of thought that exists throughout this movement, for lack of a better word, and it even extends to Cromwell. This is what I'm uncovering unbelievable things about Cromwell, but there's this strain where it's just assumed that this is just pos bullshit and we're not going to talk about it. And basically, I think most people in these nationalist circles are ignorant. They hear something that some American podcast has said, and that's it.
Yeah, there are based Anglican churches still. They're just pretty rare, although I suspect Adaman could talk about that more than I could.
They're easier to find than you think. It's
but again,
if you want a good Anglican church, the Anglo-Catholics are a good bet. You can also find a few conservative evangelical churches.
The Anglo-Catholics are mostly the high church guys. Yeah, absolutely.
They're high church, but there are two branches of high church. You get the high church Anglican, and then you get the Anglo-Catholics. And the Anglo-Catholics are like, no, we're not going to have women priests. We're not going to do civil service, civil unions, blah blah blah. They won't do any of that. And
the vicar I got married with and who baptized my son was, I think, an Anglo-Catholic on those terms, although he never called himself that. But he was certainly high church Anglican. Yeah.
And if anyone's
this was years ago, so it probably didn't even matter back then. But yeah.
I mean, I do get this. I do get the sentiment of pick and mix Christianity. It's like, if you just Like if you're changing church because it's based, you shouldn't be in church.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. That you don't go to church because one is more based than the other. It's just not why you do it. So stop LARPing and stop wasting everyone's time. Go home.
Well, that's why I don't go to church, because I'd be laughing if I did.
Yeah, exactly. You're just wasting people's time.
Yeah, I don't really believe it. I did it when I got married and for my son when he was baptized, mostly for my wife, but also because it was traditional, and I'm a traditionalist.
Now, of course, I'm an evil foreign cuck because, of course, I converted to Orthodoxy, and that makes me a pick and mix Christian.
From what, mate? From what?
I was born in the Scottish Episcopalian Church.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Was that a big move or not?
Most people, everyone around me thought it was much more big than I thought it was for me personally. I just enjoy Orthodox churches, and I enjoy Orthodox liturgy more. And if you and I've read more about Orthodoxy, and I generally find theology a bit better than Anglicanism. But like, if I joined because it was more based, like I don't think my priest would have let me through the door. And I don't think any self-respecting faith should let people through the door. The dog hates orthodoxy, possibly.
No, my little dog is just a little bit insane. Don't worry.
Oh, bless. But
he's a good little dog, but he's a bit strange.
I just wonder, how is it really possible to have faith that's driven by rationalism? Because all of these, the idea of like, I'm going to convert to a different denomination is just an entirely rational thought process, and I don't think
it is. I really don't. I mean, I think for most people, they have. I mean, for me, I prefer Orthodox liturgy. I don't like it because it says this thing that they don't say in the Anglican Church, because it's almost completely the same. It's just the feeling. You get a feeling. In at least I did, and you get this feeling of divinity and something beyond yourself, and this spiritual essence that I never really got in Anglicanism. And I mean, sure, maybe
you weren't in Anglicanism, were you?
The Scottish Episcopalian Church is the Anglican Communion.
Oh, is it? Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, it's not the Kirk. It's the.
No, I was just going to say, most of the Scots who I knew, like when I lived up in Stirling, were Kirk people. So yeah. Fair enough.
No, I mean, just about everyone near me is Kirky. I have to get on a bus into town to get to an Orthodox church. But no, I mean, and maybe I am LARPing, and maybe I am maybe I am cucking because it's a more base church. But I think there is a genuine. You should be giving people a reasonable distinction, and I also think that if for a lot of people, if you are just converting because one's based or like, you should probably reevaluate. I understand, like sacramental violations, like
Can I just ask you, Ozzy?
Yeah.
Were you religious when you were like a younger man?
No.
Let's say.
I did not have a very fun adolescence, and I was a pretty angry teenager. So I was very much an atheist.
So, Adam, and I'm going to ask you the same question. Were you religious when you were like a teenager and so on?
No. When I was a kid, I was raised by a very, very atheistic single mother. Who was very much into her rationalism and all sorts of other stuff. And so, no, I wasn't. But it did come to me quite early because my godmother, who is very religious, who I like a lot, she really wanted me to get confirmed. Okay. And so I started going to church, obviously, for that. And then you kind of, and then I started thinking, well, if this means something to her, and I like her a lot, and she was a very smart, very well-traveled woman, I thought that there must be something about this that I'm kind of missing. So I started looking more into it, and I was kind of a bit of one of these sort of cringy liberal Christians for quite a while, where I was like, oh, you know, Christianity probably does have a bit of a dark past, but it's kind of reformed now, guys. But now I'm closer to the religious extremist end of the spectrum.
Fair enough. Sojo, what about you, mate? Did you have any sort? I doubt it, but did you have any sort of religious upbringing?
Not at all. I mean, I went to a Church of England school. I mean, but that's half the course, right?
Yeah.
It's
They were
interesting.
good schools back in the day.
Yes,
They were good schools back in the day.
On my mother's side, she's overwhelmingly of Scottish ancestry, and we know that there was a whole bunch of them that were Bible bashers, like hardcore Calvinists. So there is part of that in the family line, but it's all been forgotten, really. Like my grandfather, he's like, no, don't care, it's a load of bullshit. But then my dad, my parents, I mean, I've said this before, my mum said, you know, oh, all that religion's ever brought to the world is war and suffering. I thought to myself, what an unbelievably ignorant statement. And my dad sort of basically just doesn't give a shit, does he? He just wants to go fishing. But my grandma,
Please, Dad.
on my dad's side, she would say, "Oh no, I'm an atheist, but I'm a Christian." And I thought to myself, well, "Grandma, what the fuck? What the fuck are you talking about?" And she basically just like joke, like a sort of cultural Christian. It's like, yeah, I don't really believe it, but I respect the traditions. And I've got a lot of respect for that. But that's it, really. Completely irreligious in the family.
All right, I'm going to take this back to when we started, and when we were talking about this wank and his affair with this other idiot, and these two married people having an affair. Surely the loss of that really basic Christian stuff, and I don't think it even particularly matters which denominations we are talking about here. All of the denominations that we're talking about would have condemned that, say, 50 years ago. Everyone would have said, look, you know, this is a bloke cheating on his wife, and this is a wife cheating on her husband, and everyone would have just said, look, that's wrong. Not the way to behave. It's just wrong. It's morally wrong. Am I not right?
I think that's true just about in every church. I mean, even the Church of England, which, you know, a lot of people take craps on. Even Rowan Williams.
I have a certain fondness for the Church of England because, insofar as I got anything to do with any church, it's the High Church of England. But yeah okay.
But you know, even then, Father Welby said that, you know, intercourse is for a man and a woman in marriage, and which is mainline Christian teaching. And I mean, people don't listen to it anymore because people are atheists these days, or whatever.
What I'm really trying to say here, Ozzy, is that, like, say, even 50 years ago, which is not that long. 50 fucking years ago, I was alive. All of the churches, every single Christian church would have condemned what happened, and they all would have said it was bad on moral grounds.
I mean, the thing is that, like, I'm pretty sure that if they were asked, they would say that, but they aren't asked. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I don't know if you see what I'm trying to say. I'm not explaining this well. Is that back then, what the churches did was that they were kind of like a background moral framework for people.
Yeah,
and I don't think we have that anymore. I just think it's gone now.
Well, I mean, I think probably the best way of expressing this would probably be through royalty. You know, the church back then said, no, you can't marry the 3 times divorced overspent spinster and still be king. And
well, that's even further back in time, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
But yes, I mean, and well, even going back into the 70s and 80s, most people were still pretty cautious about Charles marrying a known philanderer like Mrs. Shand.
Yeah.
But like going into the modern day, His Royal Highness, as he's written, has married a woman who now refuses to put her Royal Highness on the certificate, rightfully so, I should add. But
well, she ain't a Royal Highness, but okay.
Yeah. So, but in 50 years ago, he would have been told, "What, marrying an actress, an American actress?"
Hang on. Look at Princess Margaret, the Queen's sister. She wasn't allowed to marry a Battle of Britain fighter hero. He was a Battle of Britain fighter ace in the RAF Fire Command.
Just Townsend.
Yeah, Townsend. She wasn't allowed to marry him because he'd been divorced.
Yeah.
And it actually ruined her damn life. It turned her into an alcoholic, and she married that idiot gay photographer guy and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah, there's problems with over and too strong moralism. I understand that, but the idea is that, I mean, the idea is that you don't divert from the rules too much. And
but I mean, a Battle of Britain fire ace, I'd allow her to marry him, frankly.
Yeah.
Even if he was divorced.
Yeah.
And they'd have probably been quite happy,
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. And I do understand that perspective.
You can never tell. Obviously, you could never tell because things happen. But, I thought that was unfair.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
it comes back a bit to what we were talking about earlier with the Gurkhas. You do your fighting for the country, and it kind of raises you a level. Because what would have happened in the old days is the king would have made you from a commoner into a knight. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because of your fighting for the country. The king would have come along, you would have knelt in front of him, you would have put his sword on your two shoulders, and you would have been made a knight. So, Townsend back then, if it had been 500 years previous or 250 years previous, he would have been made a knight just for his services.
Yeah,
which
sure.
Would have been. I'm a traditionalist, honestly. Yeah. This is the way I look at it.
Yeah. I mean, this brings us back to what I was talking about at the start. People who serve the country with distinction ought to be rewarded with distinction.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm always going to hold that. A knight still can't marry a king's daughter is actually a pretty valid critique.
Well, all right, but then he could be made a baron, and then he could.
What I would put forward is that it is traditional British and indeed European standards that a woman can choose her husband.
Up to a point. I don't totally agree with that, but up to a point. But also, I would say, a knight can't marry a king's daughter. Well, maybe not, but the king can make that knight a baron, and if it's a second daughter, yes, she can. There was no question about the succession of the throne involved in that. Because Queen Elizabeth was going to have kids, so it wasn't about that. And with a second daughter, it would have been perfectly possible for a bloke to be made Sir somebody, and then to be made some minor barony or something like that. And then, sure, he can marry a princess who's not in line for the throne. That happened very often in the old world.
Yeah. I do understand that perspective, and there is, of course, the obvious caveat that, like, well, divorce has to exist because people make mistakes, and you can't punish them for making a mistake because
Well,
otherwise
you can't believe that if you're a Catholic, but of course you're not a Catholic.
no.
How much difference is there between the Orthodox and Catholic views on divorce?
In Orthodoxy, you're allowed to, when you divorce once, you're allowed to remarry. If you divorce a second time, remarrying is heavily frowned upon.
Uh-huh.
And then if you divorce again, you are not allowed to remarry. At least under most circumstances, unless it's like domestic abuse or something, you're not remarrying. And then a fourth marriage is never allowed ever.
Okay, fair enough. See, now,
I have a
listen, go.
I'm really quite ignorant about Christianity. I don't pretend to. I can't remember the last time I've read the Bible. In fact, I'd be surprised if I've read the Bible back to front. But nevertheless, are the rules and conventions about marriage actually codified in the Bible at all?
There are bits and pieces that are, and the rest
they vary a lot between Christian denominations.
A lot of it does vary. So the original thing, so of course, the original reference point for Christian marriage isn't Christian marriage; it's Jewish marriage. And a lot of that
problematic.
It can be problematic if you think it is.
Sorry, I'm kidding.
Yeah, which is set out in the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. But in terms of Christian marriage, I mean, Christ talks a lot about particularly adultery. He says divorce is allowed on grounds of adultery. Otherwise, it's a sin. Marrying a divorced person is a sin. And there are definitely conventions. And Paul talks a lot about how marriage is the marital right only belongs within marriage, and that marriage is like a worldly concession. I think Paul was a bit overzealous there, but he basically said that, like, if you really can't control yourself, go get hitched.
Speaking as an agnostic, I happen to think we're going too deep into this religious stuff at the moment. Yeah. Although I would be happy to do a religious stream at some point. So I'm just going to ask Armin, because I know he is fairly religious, if he has anything to add to that bit. And then I'm going to move us on to something else that I think is quite important.
No, I haven't really got anything to add. I did one little thing I saw the other day, which I thought was quite funny, since you brought up St. Paul, is there was this Catholic church in America where they've got a woman vicar, and obviously I don't think it's endorsed at all. But she goes, when people were asking her about it, she goes, "Oh, I just ignore St. Paul," and I'm like, okay, that's a huge amount of the New Testament, but whatever.
Yep, makes sense to me. Kind of typical leftist, really. Okay, so I'm going to move us on now to a new subject. HMS Defender in the Black Sea.
Oh, is this the destroyer?
Yeah, the destroyer.
Steamship.
No, HMS Defender is a Type 45 Garing-class destroyer. She's the size of a World War II cruiser, and she is the most advanced air defense destroyer in the world. Like, even the Yanks like having them next to their carriers because they're better than their ships. And apparently, according to the Russians, she had warning shots fired at her. There were aircraft going over her, and Britain was awfully bad. So I'm going to I have some points to make about this, but I'm just going to throw it open to what you guys think about any of that.
I mean, all I would say is that I really don't know what we're doing in the Black Sea. Just let the Russian bear be, guys. Just don't poke a bear, and you'll be fine.
Oh, we're talking about the recent incident, you mean?
Yeah. Last
Right.
week, yeah.
Well, we're the Royal Navy and we go with wherever the fuck we want, so.
Yes! Yes! Alban, yes!
Although,
Totally agree.
I mean,
well, I suppose we could just let them have just the Black Sea and cut them off everywhere else.
yeah, I mean,
no, don't even do that.
I mean,
Sergio, any comment?
I honestly don't care.
Right.
I sort of foreign affairs, things going on in the world, matters of state are just utterly unimportant to me.
I sometimes think,
I sympathise with that.
Sergio, I sometimes think if an atom bomb landed on UK or 5 and destroyed the whole place, you'd say the same thing.
Of course, I wouldn't say the same thing.
I almost do though, because it's kind of what you always say.
Because yes, actually, I'm sorry. I'm gonna critique you again.
Go for it, mate.
Your conception of what
I was absolutely rallying you.
Oh, were you?
Oh, of course.
Oh. But your conception of what it is to be British is entirely tied up in the institutions of state.
No,
the British Army,
not true.
The British Empire. All of these are all functions of the state.
Not true.
And it's as if there is nothing. We as a people, we don't even exist absent of the state. That's quite often what it sounds like to me.
Ooh.
And so when I say something like, well, because let's be honest, this is not a government of our people. This is a rogue global government.
Totally agree.
That is using our name to spread gay imperialism around the world, and are meant to sort of take sides and
largely agree with that.
And stand for what's happening in the Crimea. I don't care.
I don't disagree with any of that.
Yeah, I get that.
I don't understand why you think I would, but okay.
I mean, what I would just put forward is that, I mean, I have a sympathy with Sojo, although I probably don't come at it from his perspective. I just don't think Britain in its state should be worrying about a thing like Russia. As Adam pointed out, we have exactly 6 destroyers. I mean, we could put one destroyer on each pole of the compass, and then have 2 to look after a carrier, and that's about it. So,
do you know what a destroyer is?
I mean, a destroyer, the current destroyers, as I understand them, are anti-aircraft missile ships. But irrespective of that, I don't really know why we're tickling the Russian bear. It's just like I find Russia just a very. I find the idea of calling up Russia's ass just a completely stupid idea. We should just, if we left them alone, I'm pretty sure they'd leave us alone. Or at least if we gave them a stern word and said leave us alone, they'll leave us alone. Like, it's that simple.
I pretty much agree with that. Adam, you got anything on this one?
No, that's. I kind of agree with Ozzy on this.
All right, I'm going to agree with all of you. I will say this: the Royal Navy has sent 1 or 2 warships into the Black Sea for at least the last 6 or 7 years. Every year. And I've seen all sorts of idiot speculation about HMS Defender, which is the 8th Royal Navy ship to bear that name. And what I think is mainly if you really want to test an air defense destroyer like HMS Defender's radars and sonars, its ranging radars and its weapons radars and all this stuff, I can't think of a better way to do it than send it just a little bit too close to the Ruskies. I mean, in reality, looking at the Russian video, HMS Defender would have shot down those Russian aircraft and destroyed that little Coast Guard ship that was in front of it very easily. So I reckon the way to look at it is this. The Royal Navy's training schedule is normally pretty high. It really is. That's why it's one of the best navies in the world. But this year, the Royal Navy's training schedule has been absolutely insane. Like, it really has been insane. And that's because the Royal Navy is sending a carrier task group through the South China Sea later in the year. And this one thing that will have happened with HMS Defender is that every guy who operates a radar or a sonar or a weapon system on Defender will have had a vastly better test than any possible exercise could have done. Now, did the Russians know about that in advance? Probably not, but I don't know. Maybe they did. Did the Yanks? Don't know. No one's going to know about that. I do absolutely think that the Russian supposedly warning shots were a fucking lot further ahead of the ship than the Russians claimed, but you know, they do that stuff all the time. And like every Russian ship that comes through the English Channel is escorted by a Royal Navy vessel, and British aircraft, be they Fleet Air Arm or RAF, fly over them quite frequently. Like, everyone does that shit. It's not just the Russians. And I just think it's part of this workup for the Royal Navy Carrier Task Group going through the South China Sea. Like, the Royal Navy a week or so ago released photographs of a Royal Navy Hunter killer nuclear submarine on the surface in the Mediterranean. Like, they never do that. The only time you ever see a British Hunter killer submarine is in British wars. You never see them in places like the Med. Recently, British and US Marine Corps aircraft flew off HMS Queen Elizabeth, the carrier, and attacked what little is left of the Islamic State. Not that there's much. Israel can't keep that going forever. Not just Israel, but, you know, the Islamic State was bollocks. But anyway. So I'd look at it all on that thing. And I think what this is really about is that when the Royal Navy Carrier Task Group sails through the South China Sea, the Chinese know that the British and the Royal Navy are not adverse to some risk because they've done it before. Like, we haven't done it before 50 million times. And B, that any of their ships or submarines or aircraft that come near it are going to get lit up immediately by every fucking radar, sonar, and weapon system there is. And to me, that's good. And I say that to me is good because my son's going to be on HMS Queen Elizabeth. But that's just me.
But don't they also know that we'll do nothing?
I don't believe that for a second, Adam. I think if there's a risk, I think they'll fire back.
Well, I mean, they didn't against the Russians, though, did they?
But they didn't need to, because the The Russian thing was vastly exaggerated by the Russians. Like, that might have been on purpose. That might have been because the Russians and the Brits were doing this on purpose. Because, like, one of the things I will say is that, like, Russia and China are natural enemies. Britain and Russia are not so much, really. So I wouldn't even go on that. But certainly the so-called Russian warning shots were vastly a long way further away from HMS Defender than the Russians said they were initially. They really were. They were a long, long way. And HMS Defender could have, like, destroyed all those Russian aircraft and that shitty little Coast Guard ship without even thinking about it. So, you know, it was 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And I just think that the way to look at this is this was part of the workup for the British carrier task group going through the South China Sea, which the Royal Navy has taken so seriously. It's unbelievable. This is the most important British naval deployment since the Falklands War in 1982. By a long way. Because in the first Gulf War, you had British destroyers destroying Iraqi missiles heading for American battleships. In the second Gulf War, you had the Royal Navy landing, Royal Marines, amphibious forces, and also providing air cover and stuff. But that was in a situation where the enemy had no navy at all. Whereas going through the South China Sea, this is the Royal Navy, like, operating in the face of the most powerful enemy navy in the world. They're not as well trained. Their ships are not as good. They don't have such good weapon systems, but they have a lot of ships.
Yeah.
And make no mistake, this is a risky operation, and everyone in the Royal Navy knows it. But the Royal Navy has been training so hard over the last 18 months, and particularly over the last 6 months, that I think the Chinese will make a real big mistake if they fuck it up.
Tristan in the chat asked, "Can we sail all the way up to Peking, or is it too shallow?"
Yeah, it's way too shallow, sadly. I think really what we're going to do is we're going to go around one side or the other of Taiwan and then meet our allies in Australia. And of course, during this voyage, there's going to be American, Australian, and also Japanese warships that are going to join in it. But it's a serious deal. It's the biggest and most important deployment of British forces since 1982. And anyone who doesn't realize that is like losing it.
Suno Hamar said, "How many submarines do they have? That's the important question. Does China have any submarines? I thought they didn't."
Yeah, China has loads, but they're shit. They're all shit. They're easily detectable. They're noisy. And but you know, the Chinese.
How many do we have?
Oh, we have 7 or 8 at the moment, I think, and at least one of them's going to be with that task group, and that one ship will easily kill 4 or 5 Chinese submarines because Chinese submarines are crap. And she also has cruise missiles as well. But yeah, no. I wouldn't concern myself about that one. Chinese submarines are absolutely shit. Chinese surface ships are a bit better. Chinese carriers are crap because they don't know how to use them yet. But yeah, we could end up in a really big, serious war later this year.
Well, I don't know.
Well,
Anyway,
I don't know, but we could. And the Royal Navy's been training for it. And I think if the Chinese try anything, they think I'm really unstuck. But that's just me. I mean, you guys probably all think that the Chinese Navy is so enormously powerful that the Royal Navy can't go near them. But
well,
I
the Royal
don't know.
Navy's too small,
Well, the Royal Navy is too small, but
and the Chinese will have the home advantage.
What's the home advantage?
That they'll be closer to their own ports
How will that help them?
because they haven't got to sail far back for repairs.
The modern warships get killed. They don't get damaged.
Right, but I mean, like the thing is, like, could we as easily retake the Falklands now?
What, today?
Yeah, as we did back in the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely.
You think so?
He's just
He's
sorting
been
out
mauled
that
by his
mutt.
dog, isn't he? He's got him in the old death spiral, I think.
Bloody dog. Honestly, I don't know what happened with this bloody dog sometimes. No, he's a good boy, and I love him very much. But yeah, no, the current Royal Navy, like Argentina today, couldn't face the Royal Navy at all. Like,
Right, but the problem is we would struggle with the force projection compared to what we had in the 80s.
But we wouldn't really, because, like, if you sent the Royal Navy aircraft, the carrier task group and the amphibious task group south, we could land almost the same forces.
I'm not sure.
Well, I am. We could land almost the same forces, and even just HMS Queen Elizabeth, assuming HMS Prince of Wales was not operational for some reason, which she is, but if she wasn't, you could put more aircraft on HMS Queen Elizabeth than you could have on Hermes and Invincible in 1982.
Yeah, but there was a lot more to it than just that, though, isn't it? There was a huge amount of ships involved in the original retaking of the Falklands.
Yes, there was. But what I'm trying to say to you is that if you look at the Royal Navy amphibious task group, which is Albion and Bulwark, and all the what are they called? Damn, I can't remember. But the Royal Navy Auxiliary Forces, we could land the same number of troops and actually have about 3 times the number of aircraft over the Falklands that we could have in 1982. That's just a fact. What's the for?
I don't know. I just think there'd be a lot of equipment missing for the logistics.
What equipment? From where?
Just the number of ships.
I don't get you, mate, because the Royal Fleet Auxiliary has not shrunk that much. The only difference would be ships taken up from trade.
Yeah. I mean, even back in the 80s, we had to requisition civilian ships.
Yeah, that's the ships taken up from trade that I was just talking about. That's been in British law for, I don't know, 150 years. Like, any time the British government gets in a war, they can get any British civilian ship and say, okay, guys, you're in the Navy. Sorry, but you are.
Yeah, I know, but that reserve isn't quite there the way it used to be.
there are less ships now than there used to be. On the other hand, the Royal Navy now has 4 huge roll-on, roll-off ferries, which we didn't have in 1982, which are Royal Navy ships, actually Royal Fleet Auxiliary ships, which are generally used for civilian ship, but they're primarily owned by the British government, and any time the British government wants to use them, they have to stop doing whatever they're doing and go and do what the British government says. And all of those ships can carry like 40 tanks and, you know, anything you want, basically.
Anyway, I've been putting it off a lot, but I need to go.
No, well, go well, mate. Nice to
All
speak to you, Al.
Yeah, talk to you later.
Go well, man. Anyone else got anything to say on this, or are you all gonna duck out?
I don't really have an opinion.
Okay, fair enough. Adam, sorry, Soja, anything, or you finished?
I really can't muster any enthusiasm for the weapons of the gay empire.
Not quite the words I would have used, yes, but I'm just not very enthusiastic about foreign war policy in this day and age. It just doesn't really interest me.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't get excited about, you know, potential war with China. I can't think of anything worse. I literally cannot think of anything worse.
Why will China be the worst war? Explain.
I'm also going to probably pop off here, by the way. Sorry about that, but I've got...
Aussie, wait 1 minute, mate.
Okay, I'm waiting.
Because Sojo is going to tell me why the worst war we could have would be with China, which I would find interesting. Like, there are loads of wars I don't think we should have, including at least 2 or 3 we've had. But China, yeah, don't care about them. But go on, Soja, please tell me, why is a war with China so bad?
Are you going to let Aussie drop off, or?
No, not necessarily. I mean, if he absolutely has to, of course, but...
Yeah, I've got church in the morning, but I'm just... I can wait for a bit, but yeah.
No, I really just want to hear what your reason for a war against China is so terrible.
I think we've got bigger fish to fry.
Like what?
At home.
Like what?
I mean, I just look at it and think to myself, what is the point of fighting a war against China when what are we fighting for? What are we fighting to save?
South China Sea,
completely cucked country that's got no moral compass whatsoever, doesn't believe in anything, and we want to fight a war with China because you think that we stand for something. We don't stand for anything, Duke.
Okay, so your idea is that Britain doesn't stand for anything, so we can't fight a war with anyone. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, well that's interesting, I guess. So
yeah,
we
can beat China by bringing transvestites. That's a great idea.
I never suggested that, but you know,
Sino did. I think
yeah, no, I saw that, but you get cunts in the chat all the time. But well, what I really meant was like, so you don't think Britain should support Australia, for example?
Well, what are we supporting?
Australia, our brothers and cousins.
Is Australia under attack?
I mean, this is like a repeat of the conversation that we've had week after week.
Yeah, we've had this conversation many times, but I'm not going to like back off it because it's true. So you don't think we should support Australia, Soja?
Well, what do they need supporting for? You think that they're under threat of invasion? I don't.
Yeah, to some degree. To some degree.
I mean, I've just laid out, you know, what our
So you
what our
basically
red lines are.
But if they were being invaded, would you supporting them?
Yes.
So when it was too late, you'd support them.
When it was too late. Well, no, I don't. Again,
Because
well, this is kind of like World War II. Well,
No,
you know, you've got to fight a preemptive strike, preemptive war. No, I don't believe in this bullshit at all. This is neocon bullshit.
Okay, I'm not a neocon. I'm really not.
Yeah, fine. You're not a neocon. I mean, we don't need you explaining what your opinion is, like on what you are and what you're not. I think we all know that you're not.
Thank
a
you
neocon.
for explaining what my opinion is. But the point is, by the time Britain could see that Australia was being invaded, it would be too late.
Duke, I'm going to quickly drop off, but before I go, a friend of mine in the chat called Tristan wants your Discord ID. Do I have leave to give it to him?
Go for it, mate.
Right. Cheers, mate. All the best, guys.
Go.
Cheers, Aussie.
Bye up.
But you see what I'm saying, Sergio? But the time the UK realizes like China's going to invade Australia, way too late. Can't stop it by then.
No. I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this preemptive. You could say that about China now. China could invade England. Let's go and nuke them.
Well, yeah, and I might even, on one level, agree with that, but I don't really. But like it's too.
I think away. You've got some sort of hidden wishes against China that you haven't really.
No, not at all.
I think you're hiding your opinions on China. I actually think you're up for a war and you actually actively want one.
So you're telling me that when my son's on HMS Queen Elizabeth, I actually want a war with China? You seriously telling me that?
Well, it sounds like it.
You're
you are saying
that. You're pushing your luck there, man.
You are saying that though, because basically you're kind of just saying it's inevitable. It's inevitable that we're going to have a war with them, so we might as well get it over and done with. I mean, that is just like aggression on your part. What else is it?
Yeah, I do think it's inevitable, but I don't really want it to happen now. I do think it's inevitable. Yeah, we are going to have a war with them. But I definitely not this year, thank you.
What, because you don't want that, or because you don't think that will happen? I mean,
because my son's on HMS Queen Elizabeth.
Oh yeah, but Chinese don't give a shit about that, do they?
Well, like I give a shit about the Chinese. I'd kill all of them in a millisecond.
Well, where's that come from? I would kill all of them. What? Like, where?
When did I say I was a liberal? I'm not a liberal, mate. I'm not a liberal.
You've got some serious China issues that are sort of.
Yeah, I detest the Chinese. I detest them. I absolutely detest them.
Well, I'm not going to indulge you in this fantasy.
Well,
I think you're unhinged on this matter, actually. If I'm being
honest. Well, all right. So I will genuinely watch as the Royal Navy carrier task group goes through the South China Sea, you supporting China and me supporting Britain.
What an absolute fucking ridiculous statement that is.
Well, I don't know what you're trying to tell me.
Because I don't want a war with China, that means that I support China.
No, I
That's
don't.
the biggest straw man ever.
I don't want a war with China either. But I think China wants a war with us.
Oh, so how inconvenient that China's placed its country next to our warships in the South China Seas. Those arseholes. Who's being aggressive here?
It's not just China in the South China Sea, though, is it?
Well, how can you frame us being in the South China Seas as being anything other than aggressive, intimidating, threatening.
Because we're sailing to Australia.
Oh yeah, of course. We're sailing to Australia. Yeah, all right. Facetious.
I don't get what you're saying. Australia is our brother. I don't understand what you're saying there, Sojo. It's so silly.
Sorry, we're just going to have to agree to disagree on this.
Well, we really are, because that is stupid. Like, if Britain doesn't sail to help Australia, who the fuck will?
Well, as it stands, Australia is not in any peril.
From China?
Yeah, from China.
You really believe that?
Yes.
Then we are going to have to agree to disagree. We really are going to have to agree to disagree. That is crazy, man. The shortest road to Australia is through China, clearly. Well, son and summer, not if you're Britain and you're a naval power. Because if you're a naval power, the shortest way to Australia is like through the Mediterranean and the Indian Pacific, and then you go to Australia. Really, Sojo, this goes back to the shit that was happening in the 1930s before Germany and Britain became big enemies. Except it's not Japan this time; it's China. And I remember when I first met the love of my life, who was an Australian girl, and she said to me once, well, I'd hope Britain would always come and help us, which at the time I thought was a bit naive, but you know what? It's fucking true. If Britain don't help Australia, then who the fuck will? So me, I'll watch the Royal Navy Carrier Task Group going through the South China Sea. And I hope the Chinese are sensible enough to fuck off back to their shitty country. But I'm a British nationalist, not a Chinese nationalist.
You sound like a jingoist at the minute.
Yeah, I'm a jingoist too. I absolutely am. Never going to pretend I'm not. But fuck the Chinese. Fuck them. You ever seen that movie? You ever seen that movie, The Amethyst Incident?
No, I've not seen a movie called The Amethyst, whatever.
Well, go and watch it, Sergio. You might kind of like it. It's like a few very brave British officers and men in the Royal Navy get this little frigate that the Chinese ambush on a river. And they get this little frigate and they get it free through pure guts and courage and skill.
And this is meant to inform my opinion on China, how and why.
I don't know, man. You remember when I was talking earlier about like real British people had something underneath that intelligence? Do you remember when we were talking about this? When I tried to explain to you that great British people like Nelson or Wellington or whatever, that they had something else going on aside from their obviously high IQ. You don't get that second bit. You don't get it.
Okay.
I don't think you do, mate. This has always been my fundamental disagreement with you, because in general terms, I totally agree with you. But you have to have that non-rational bit that is love of your nation and your nation's armed forces. You have
So,
to have that.
love of my nation means that I should hate and despise the Chinese. Okay.
When did I say I hate and despise them?
You pretty much just said it 2 minutes ago.
No, only compared to the British.
Sorry, what?
Only compared to the British. I hate and despise everyone compared to the British.
Right, okay. Can we let's probably wrap this up?
I think we should too, because there's a difference between a patriot and a non-patriot. I like you, Sojo, but you don't have the underlying love. Well, maybe you do, and you just don't show it. But you have to have the underlying love, man. Good night, Cloak. Please like, share, and subscribe. Good night.